The world ended, not with a bang, but with a series of frantic, wet gurgles that echoed through the supermarket aisles. My basket, half filled with forgotten groceries, clattered to the floor as a piercing scream ripped through the fluorescent-lit air. I didn't need to see it to know. The news had been full of isolated incidents for days, grainy cell phone footage of people tearing at each other, their eyes milky, their movements wrong. But this was real. This was here. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. The scream was cut short, replaced by a choking sound, then a low, animalistic growl. Footsteps, shambling, dragging, getting closer. I froze between shelves stacked with canned goods, the metallic smell of tinned peaches suddenly cloying. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, but my feet were rooted. My breath caught, shallow and ragged in my throat. A shadow fell across the aisle, long and distorted. A woman, her shopping cart overturned, lay motionless, her arm twisted at an unnatural angle. Beyond her, a figure emerged. It was Mr. Henderson, the produce manager, but not really him. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, fixed on nothing. His mouth hung open, a black cavity, and a dark, viscous fluid drooled onto his stained blue apron. His movements were a grotesque mockery of life, a slow, lurching shuffle that scraped his shoes against the tiled floor. He was looking for something, looking for me. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced through my paralysis. I dropped low, crawling behind a display of cereal boxes, my hands scraping on the dusty floor. My mind raced, fragments of half-heard survival tips flashing through my head. Stay quiet, don't draw attention. But the sound of my own ragged breathing felt like a roar in the sudden, eerie silence of the supermarket. Henderson paused, his head tilting slightly, as if listening. He wasn't smart, not like us, but there was an animal cunning in his stillness, a primal sense for prey. This wasn't just a sick person, this was something else. And I realized, with a chill that went deeper than fear, that this was just the beginning. The first real horror I'd witnessed firsthand, and already I could feel humanity's fate being sealed with every dragging step of his rotting shoes. A floor tile popped, a tiny sound, but in the silence it might as well have been a gunshot. Henderson's head snapped towards the noise. He turned, slowly, inexorably, his ruined face a mask of hunger. He wasn't looking at me, but at a stack of water bottles just behind where I was hiding. Was he drawn to the sound, or did he sense the subtle shift in the air, the faint scent of my fear? I pressed myself against the shelf, my shoulder digging into a stack of pasta boxes. The cold plastic against my cheek was a stark contrast to the burning adrenaline flooding my veins. He took another shuffling step, his groan a low, guttural rasp that seemed to vibrate through the very floor. My eyes darted around, desperately searching for an escape. The emergency exit was at the far end of the store, a good 50 yards away, through a maze of aisles and other things. The main entrance was closer, but I'd seen it, people running, falling, being torn apart. A wave of nausea washed over me. I had to get out. I had to. I gripped a can of chickpeas, its cold metal a small comfort, a useless weapon. I needed a plan, something more than just prayer. But my mind was a jumble of raw terror. Henderson shuffled past my hiding spot, closer to the water bottles. He reached out a hand, fingers gnarled and stained, and brushed against the plastic. He wasn't drinking, he wasn't thinking, he was just moving, driven by an instinct I couldn't comprehend. Another groan, this one deeper, more resonant, came from the main part of the store. Not just one, many. A chorus of the damned. My blood ran cold. They were coming this way. I was trapped. I had to move. Now. I scrambled on hands and knees, ignoring the pain in my scraped palms, moving silently towards the dairy aisle. If I could get to the back, maybe there was an employee exit. Henderson didn't react. He was still focused on the water bottles, or maybe just swaying in the general direction of the noise. The groans grew louder, closer. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Through a gap in the cereal boxes, I saw them. A dozen figures, shambling, lurching, their clothing torn, their skin a ghastly gray. Shoppers, clerks, mothers, fathers, now just them. And they were heading straight for the back of the store. My heart seized. The dairy aisle was a dead end. There was no employee exit, just a loading dock, which was probably sealed, or worse, already overrun. My only chance was the main entrance. I had to go through them. The thought was a raw scream in my head. I had to be fast, I had to be silent, and I had to be lucky. I pushed myself up, slowly, carefully, my eyes fixed on the distant main entrance. The infected were still concentrating on the grocery section, drawn by the echo of the earlier scream. I started to move, not running, but a rapid, almost frantic walk, keeping low, weaving between shelves. Every second felt like an hour. Every squeak of my shoe on the linoleum felt like a siren. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the end of the aisle, blocking my path. Not a shuffler. This one was different. It moved with a loping gait, faster, more purposeful. Its head darted from side to side. Its eyes, though clouded, seemed to track the subtle movements of the air.
It was a younger man, probably the stock boy, now a twisted parody of his former self. His t-shirt was stained, his jaw unhinged, but his legs moved with a terrible efficiency. He wasn't just infected, he was evolving. My breath hitched. This wasn't the lumbering horror I'd seen on TV. This was a predator. This was a nightmare given speed. I flattened myself against a shelf of pet food, the pungent smell of kibble doing little to mask the metallic tang of fear in my mouth. My mind flashed back to the headlines. Unusual activity in major cities. New strain of influenza? They hadn't called them zombies, not yet. But I was watching zombies evolve in real time, right in front of me. And the implications were terrifying. The stockboy zombie paused, its head twitching, a low growl rumbling in its chest. It hadn't seen me, not directly, but it sensed me. The air itself seemed to crackle with its predatory awareness. Its eyes, even through their milky haze, seemed to be scanning, searching. This was a hunter, not a mindless shuffler. I needed a distraction, something loud, something that would draw its attention away, even for a second. My eyes darted to the tall, unstable stack of dog food bags behind me. If I could push it? My fingers, clammy with sweat, fumbled for the edge of the stack. It was heavy, awkwardly balanced. I leaned into it, pushing with all my might, muscles screaming in protest. The stack swayed, groaned, then, with a deafening crash, it toppled. Bags of kibble burst open, spilling across the floor, scattering with a sound like 100 tiny drums. The stockboy zombie spun, its head snapping towards the noise. It let out a piercing shriek, a sound that wasn't just a groan, but something sharper, more aggressive. It lunged towards the fallen dog food, not to eat, but to investigate the disturbance. This was my chance. I bolted, sprinting down the aisle, past the fallen dog food, past the twitching zombie stockboy, adrenaline surging through my veins. The shrieks and groans of the other infected were a symphony of terror behind me, growing louder, closer. They were drawn by the noise, by the scent of a living human. I could feel their collective awareness shifting, turning towards me. The main entrance was ahead, a beacon of fading sunlight. But between me and it, a small group of infected milled aimlessly, their back to me. They were the slow ones, the original strain, the shamblers. I had to get past them. I didn't slow down. I plowed straight into them, a desperate, frantic surge of momentum. One stumbled, another turned, its ruined face a blur. I shoved past a third, feeling the rough fabric of its torn shirt against my arm, the sickening smell of decay washing over me. A hand, cold and clammy, grabbed my jacket sleeve.
I ripped myself free, the fabric tearing with a sound like a gunshot. Then I was through. The sliding doors were open, jammed in place by debris. Sunlight, harsh and blinding after the gloom of the supermarket, hit my face. I gasped for air, tasting dust and fear. Outside, it was chaos. Cars, abandoned and wrecked, littered the parking lot. Smoke curled from distant buildings, and everywhere, those things. Shambling, groaning, lurching. But even here, out in the open, I saw them, the faster ones, the evolved ones. Darting between cars, their movements fluid, terrifyingly efficient. I didn't stop. I ran, blindly, towards the nearest car, a beat-up sedan with its driver's side door hanging open. Keys, I needed keys, or a crowbar, anything. But hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. Just survive, just keep moving. I dove into the car, slamming the door shut. The lock was broken, useless. I fumbled with the ignition, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't grip the key. No key, of course not. The car was empty, just another death trap. Outside, the groaning grew louder. They had seen me. A dozen of them, drawn by the sound of the door, by the smell of fresh fear. They shuffled towards the car, their dead eyes fixed on me. Among them, I saw another of the fast ones, a woman in a torn business suit, moving with a disturbing grace. Her head twitched, her jaw worked, and I realized with a fresh wave of dread that they weren't just evolving in speed, they were learning, adapting. My eyes darted around the car's interior. Nothing, just a deflated air freshener and a single lonely CD. The fuel gauge was on empty. Even if I found a key, it wouldn't matter. I was trapped again, surrounded. And the sliding doors of the supermarket had just vomited forth another wave of horrors. My heart thundered, a frantic drumbeat against the impending doom. This was it. This was where it ended. Humanity's fate was sealed, and I was just another casualty. The first infected slammed into the car door, rattling the frame. Its face, a grotesque mask of decay, pressed against the window, leaving a smear of dark fluid. Another joined it, then another. They clawed at the glass, their moans a horrifying chorus, their movements frantic. The car began to rock with their combined assault. My eyes landed on the glove compartment. Empty hope, but hope nonetheless. I fumbled it open. Inside, amongst a pile of old receipts and a broken pen, was a small, heavy object. A tire iron. Not a gun, but it was something. Something solid, something heavy. A chance. I gripped the cold metal, its weight a sudden unexpected comfort in my trembling hand. It was rusty, pitted, but it felt good, substantial. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe I could fight. Just maybe. The passenger side window cracked under a relentless series of blows. Shards of glass sprayed inward, catching the harsh afternoon light. A pale, grasping hand reached through, fingers twitching, desperate to find purchase. I let out a choked cry. This was it. Fight or die. And I wasn't ready to die. Not yet. I lunged, swinging the tire iron with all the strength born of sheer desperation. The metal connected with the extended arm with a sickening crunch. The infected shrieked, a high-pitched, inhuman sound, and its arm retreated. The others paused, their moaning momentarily hushed, their dead eyes fixed on the new threat. They weren't smart, not truly, but they understood pain, understood aggression. I climbed out of the passenger side, tire iron held high, my vision narrowed, focused only on the immediate threat. The first one, the one whose arm I'd shattered, stood swaying, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. It lunged again, but slower this time, its arm hanging uselessly. I brought the tire iron down, not at its head, but at its legs, hoping to disable it. It crumpled, a tangle of torn clothes and useless limbs. But the others were already reacting. The faster ones, the ones who had evolved, were circling, not just shambling forward. Two of them split, moving to flank me, their movements eerily coordinated. This wasn't mindless hunger, this was a pack. I had witnessed basic cooperation, a horrifying leap in their collective behavior. My breath hitched. They were learning, they were adapting, and humanity's fate was becoming sealed with every strategic move they made. This was more than just a plague, it was an intelligence, primitive but growing, manifesting itself in their hunger. I pivoted, swinging the tire iron in a wide arc, keeping them at bay. The rusted metal whistled through the air. One of the flankers, a man in a tattered security guard uniform, lunged. I sidestepped, bringing the iron down on his shoulder. He staggered, but didn't fall, his ruined face contorted in a silent scream. I had to get to open ground. I couldn't fight a whole pack in the confines of the parking lot, weaving between cars. I needed to escape, to run, to find a place where I could breathe, think, and maybe, just maybe, process the terrifying reality that was unfolding around me. My eyes scanned the horizon, past the burning city, past the plumes of smoke that stained the afternoon sky. There, in the distance, a highway overpass. If I could get to that, I could get out of this cursed parking lot. I could find a path away from the immediate danger. But first, I had to get through them. I had to buy myself time. A new idea, desperate and risky, flashed into my mind. The gas tank. If I could puncture it, if I could ignite the fuel. It was a long shot.
It was probably suicide, but it might create enough of a distraction to let me escape. I backed towards the nearest car, a minivan with its rear window shattered. The pack of evolved zombies followed, their low growls a constant thrumming in my ears. I could feel their presence, their hungry awareness, pressing in on me from all sides. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against the thin wall of my chest. Every muscle in my body was screaming for me to run, to curl up and hide, but I forced myself to move with purpose. I found the minivan's gas cap, still intact. My hands, slick with sweat and grime, fumbled with the tire iron. The metal was blunt, but maybe with enough force I could pierce the tank itself, not just the cap. One of the shamblers, slower, dumber, stumbled too close. I brought the tire iron down on his head, a wet, sickening thud. It dropped, convulsing briefly, then went still. A small victory, but it bought me milliseconds. The evolved ones were smarter. They didn't charge blindly. They maintained their distance, circling, waiting for an opening. Their eyes, though dead, seemed to hold a terrible patience. They were learning. They were evolving. And with every passing moment, I could feel humanity's fate being sealed by their horrifying adaptation. I braced the tire iron against the gas tank, aiming for the metal itself, not the cap. I pulled back, summoning every ounce of strength I had, and swung. The impact was jarring, a loud clang that echoed through the parking lot. A dent, but no puncture. Damn it. I tried again and again, adrenaline pumping through my veins, blurring my vision. Each clang was a thunderclap, drawing more of the infected towards me. They were converging, a horrifying tide of the dead, their groans and snarls growing into a deafening roar. On the third swing, the metal gave way with a screech. A thin stream of gasoline, dark and shimmering, began to weep from the puncture. The pungent smell hit me immediately, sharp and acrid. This was it, the gamble. Now, fire. My eyes darted around, searching. A shattered streetlight lay nearby, its wires exposed, sparks. But how to get there? How to create a spark when surrounded by a sea of death? Then I remembered, the car itself, the wrecked sedan I'd first tried to get into. If I could get to its engine compartment, maybe the battery. It was a long shot, a desperate, suicidal thought, but I was out of options. "This is it," I whispered, the words raw and choked. This is how humanity's fate was sealed, and I was going to be an active participant in my own end. I sprinted towards the sedan, tire irons still clutched in my hand, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The evolved infected were fast, but my burst of desperation was faster. I lunged over the hood, ignoring the sharp pain as my knee scraped against jagged metal. Under the hood, the battery. My fingers, numb with adrenaline, fumbled with the corroded terminals. One of the evolved ones, the security guard, was already on the hood, crawling towards me, its jaws snapping. Its eyes were fixed, utterly, terrifyingly focused. It was like nothing I had ever seen. Not just a reanimated corpse, but a weapon, honed and directed. I found a loose cable, its copper strands frayed and exposed. I didn't know what I was doing, just acting on a desperate impulse. I scraped the exposed wire against the battery terminal, hoping for a spark, for anything. Nothing, just a faint sizzle. The security guard zombie was closer now, its putrid breath hot on my face. I could smell the rot, the stale blood, the decay. Its fingers, surprisingly strong, wrapped around my ankle, trying to pull me deeper into the engine compartment. I screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. I kicked, slamming my heel into its face, feeling bone give way. It recoiled, shrieking. This was my last chance. I found a wrench, lying discarded in the engine compartment. With trembling hands, I brought it down on the battery terminal, a desperate, uncontrolled strike. Crack! A brilliant flash of sparks erupted, hot and blinding, showering my face. A small flame caught on a patch of oil. It flickered, then caught, licking greedily at the spilled gasoline, the air heavy with its fumes. Whoosh! The flame roared to life, a hungry beast. The entire engine compartment ignited in a blinding flash, a miniature sun in the desolate parking lot. The security guard zombie, its legs tangled in the engine, caught fire, its shrieks turning into choked, burning gurgles. The other infected, drawn by the light and the noise, paused. They weren't smart enough to understand fire, but they reacted to the sudden, overwhelming stimulus. For a precious second, their collective attention shifted, drawn to the burning car, to the horrifying spectacle. This was my opening. I scrambled out from under the hood, ignoring the searing pain in my hands, the smell of burnt hair clinging to me. The fire was spreading, consuming the sedan, licking at the spilled gasoline that formed a widening pool on the asphalt. I ran. Not towards the highway overpass, not towards any specific destination, just away. Away from the flames, away from the shrieking, burning dead, away from the supermarket of horrors. My legs pumped, my lungs burned, my entire body screaming in protest, but I kept going. The explosion, when it came, was deafening. The sedan, engulfed in flames, finally gave way. A concussion wave slammed into me, knocking me off my feet. I hit the ground hard, rolling, my head cracking against the unforgiving pavement. My vision swam. Stars exploded behind my eyes. Darkness. I woke to the smell of ozone and burnt flesh, a taste of ash and blood in my mouth. My head throbbed, a dull, insistent ache. My limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. For a moment, I lay there, disoriented, unsure where I was or what had happened. Then the memories flooded back, sharp and brutal. The supermarket, Henderson, the evolved stock boy, the burning car. My eyes snapped open. The world was bathed in a sickly orange glow. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of despair. The burning sedan was a skeletal wreck, a smoking monument to my desperate gamble. And around it, still, the infected. Many of them were gone, vaporized in the explosion, or drawn away by the immense noise. But a core group remained, shambling aimlessly, drawn by the residual heat, the lingering smell of burnt things. I was lying in a ditch, half hidden by overgrown weeds, on the edge of the parking lot. A small, miraculous pocket of safety. My head was bleeding, a sticky warmth trickling down my temple. My hands were raw, covered in grime and superficial burns. But I was alive. Against all odds, I was alive. A sound, a new sound, reached my ears. Not a groan, not a shriek, but a soft, rhythmic thump, 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 coming from the direction of the highway overpass. My heart lurched. What new horror awaited me? Had the zombies evolved to create drums? I pushed myself up, wincing, every muscle protesting. My vision was still blurry, but I forced myself to focus. The sound was distinct now, clearer. Not drums, a helicopter. Distant, but definitely a helicopter. Hope, a dangerous, fragile thing. Military, rescue, or just more people flying into this nightmare, oblivious to the horrors that scurried below. I dragged myself out of the ditch, ignoring the pain, my eyes fixed on the distant thumping. The highway overpass. It was still there, still my best chance. I couldn't stay here. The lingering smell of burnt flesh, of my desperate act, would surely draw more of them. I started to move, a slow, painful shuffle that mirrored the creatures I was trying to escape. My tire iron was gone, lost somewhere in the ditch. I was unarmed, alone. But I had survived, and that meant something. It had to. As I reached the on-ramp to the overpass, the thumping grew louder. The helicopter was closer now, a dark silhouette against the fiery sunset. But it wasn't flying steadily. Its movements were erratic, jerky. Something was wrong. My heart sank. Of course, nothing was ever easy. Nothing was ever a true rescue. Then a sudden, horrifying insight. The evolved ones, the fast ones. They didn't just move faster. They were attracted to specific things. Sound, movement. They were adapting, not just physically, but behaviorally. They were becoming a collective consciousness, a horrifying organism. And the helicopter, a giant, noisy, flying target, was a beacon for them. The helicopter suddenly dipped sharply, its rotor sputtering. A plume of black smoke erupted from its tail. It was going down. Not a rescue, not a hope. Just another casualty in this horrifying, evolving war. My legs froze. I watched, helpless, as the giant machine spun, losing altitude rapidly. It was going to crash, and it was going to crash close. No, I whispered, the word ripped from my throat. No, no. The crash was a symphony of destruction. A grinding roar of tearing metal, a concussive boom that shook the very ground beneath my feet, followed by a blinding fireball that lit up the entire landscape. The sound was deafening, a final, despairing cry from a dying world. I shielded my eyes, but the force of the blast still threw me backward, sending me tumbling down the embankment, landing hard in another ditch. My head cracked against something unyielding. My vision blurred again, the orange glow of the burning helicopter mixing with the blackness behind my eyes. When I pushed myself up this time, the world was silent again. The burning helicopter was a new, terrible star in the twilight, casting long, dancing shadows. And the silence was worse than the noise. The silence meant they were coming. Drawn by the crash, drawn by the fresh meat. I clambered out of the ditch, my body screaming in protest. My head throbbed, my vision was still fuzzy, but I forced myself to move. I had to get away from the crash site. It was a magnet for them. As I started to walk, stumbling, my mind raced. The evolved ones, the faster, smarter ones. They didn't just react to noise, they responded. They learned. And a crash like that, it wasn't just a food source. It was a stimulus, a new challenge. They would adapt. They would learn how to exploit such events. I could feel it, a cold, terrible certainty in my bones. I was watching zombies evolve, truly evolve, from mindless shamblers to something that felt coordinated, something that felt directed. And humanity's fate was being sealed not by a lack of fight, but by the terrifying speed of their enemy's adaptation. I had to find shelter. I had to find a weapon. I had to find a reason to keep going, because the world had changed, and it wasn't going to change back. I stumbled across the highway, avoiding the burning debris, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of safety. A small, isolated farmhouse, barely visible in the fading light, beckoned in the distance. It was a long shot, probably already overrun, but it was something. As I limped towards it, a new fear began to settle in my gut, colder than any I'd felt before. What if the evolution wasn't just about speed or pack hunting? What if they were evolving in other ways? What if they were becoming us? The thought sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the encroaching night chill. A flash of movement in the trees to my left. Not a shuffler. Too fast. Too purposeful. My blood ran cold. I ran. My injured legs screaming in protest, but I ran. Towards the farmhouse, towards an unknown future, away from the horrors that watched and learned, evolving with every step I took. Humanity's fate was sealed, yes, but I wasn't going to let it seal my fate, not without a fight. The farmhouse seemed impossibly far away, a flickering, uncertain hope in the encroaching gloom. The wind, picking up now, carried the smell of smoke and decay, a grim perfume for the end of the world. As I stumbled along the overgrown verge, my mind reeled, trying to process the speed of the catastrophe. Hours, just hours since the first scream in the supermarket. And already cities burned, military forces were decimated, and the very nature of the infected had changed. I watched zombies evolve. The phrase echoed in my head, a haunting mantra. From shambling, mindless drones to faster, more reactive, even semi-coordinated hunters. What would they be by morning? What new horrors would the dawn bring? The farmhouse finally loomed before me, a dark silhouette against the smoldering horizon. 2 stories, a decaying barn beside it, and a rusted pickup truck parked haphazardly in the driveway. No lights, no sounds, just a profound, unsettling silence. Too quiet, always too quiet. Every instinct screamed that it was a trap, a lure, a place where new, evolved horrors would lie in wait. But my legs were giving out. My head throbbed. I needed rest. I needed shelter, even if it was just a brief reprieve before the inevitable. I approached cautiously, each step agony, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The air here was heavy with the smell of damp earth and something else, something faintly metallic? Blood? Or just a ghost of what was? The front door hung ajar, a dark maw inviting me in. I hesitated, my hand gripping a loose piece of fencing, a pathetic substitute for a weapon. What if someone was inside? What if something was inside? My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. "Hello?" I called out, my voice raspy, barely a whisper. The sound was swallowed by the silence, returning only the echo of my own fear. I pushed the door open slowly, the rusty hinges groaning in protest. The darkness within was absolute, heavy, suffocating. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen was cracked, the battery dead, useless. I stepped inside, my foot scuffing on something soft. I froze. Reached down, my fingers brushing against fur. Cold, stiff fur. A dog, or what was left of one. Its body was torn, half devoured. The metallic smell was stronger now, definitely blood. My stomach lurched. This place wasn't empty. It had been visited, and the visitors hadn't been friendly. I backed away slowly, my eyes trying to pierce the gloom. This wasn't safety. This was a charnel house. But as I turned to flee, a floorboard creaked above me. Not the groan of a house settling. This was a definite, deliberate sound. Something was upstairs. Something living. My breath hitched. I was trapped. Again. I dove behind a dilapidated armchair, heart pounding. My mind raced, trying to assess the situation. One or many? Shambling or one of the evolved ones, waiting patiently in the dark? The idea of a patient, waiting zombie was a horrifying thought, a leap in their intelligence that made my blood run cold. Please, I whispered to myself, don't be smart, don't be smart. The creaking came again, closer this time. A rhythmic thump, 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 like something heavy dragging itself across the floorboards above. Not human, too heavy, too slow, but deliberate. Then silence. Absolute, crushing silence. The kind of silence that screams worse than any noise. It was waiting. It was listening. And I was the prey. My hands, still scraped and raw from the parking lot, tightened on the splintered fence post. My eyes, though barely seeing in the pitch black, strained for any movement, any shift in the oppressive darkness. My entire body tensed, preparing for a fight I knew I couldn't win. A low growl, deep and resonant, emanated from the top of the stairs. It wasn't the wet gurgle of the supermarket shamblers. This was different. More powerful, more animal. Then a new sound, a wet slurp followed by a crunching. Feeding. It was feeding. And whatever it was eating, it wasn't quiet about it. My stomach turned. I wanted to run, to scream, to disappear. But I was frozen, paralyzed by the horror unfolding above me. This wasn't just a zombie. This was something else. Something truly monstrous. The crunching stopped. The growl intensified, a low guttural vibration that seemed to shake the very foundations of the old house. Then a scraping sound, something heavy, metallic being dragged. What could it be? My imagination, fueled by terror, conjured images of grotesque mutations, of beings that had evolved beyond anything I could comprehend. A sliver of moonlight, thin and pale, finally pierced through a grimy window, illuminating a small section of the living room. Dust motes danced in the ethereal beam, giving the scene an otherworldly quality. I could see the torn dog, now even more horrifying in the faint light. And I could see the bottom of the stairs, dark and foreboding. "Who's there?" I called out again, my voice trembling, barely audible. "Show yourself." A low chuckle answered me, a dry, rasping sound that was undeniably human. My blood ran cold. Not a zombie, a survivor, or something worse. "Well, well, well," the voice rasped from the top of the stairs, heavy with smoker's phlegm. "Look what the cat dragged in. Fresh meat." A figure emerged from the shadows at the top of the stairs, backlit by the faint moonlight. Not an infected, a man. Older, gaunt, his face a road map of wrinkles and cynicism. He held a shotgun, casually, as if it were a walking stick, and slung over his shoulder, a rifle, a real weapon. "Didn't think I'd get company tonight," he said, his eyes glinting in the gloom. "Especially not one so naive. Screaming into the darkness like that. You'll draw every goddamn shambler for miles, girl." My heart, which had briefly soared with the hope of another human, now plummeted into a pit of despair. He wasn't a rescuer. He wasn't a friend. He was a threat. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice stronger now, laced with defiance. He chuckled again, a dry, humorless sound. "Name's Silas, and you're on my property, or what's left of it. What's your name, fresh meat?" "I'm not fresh meat," I retorted, gripping my fence post tighter, "and I'm leaving." "Oh, I don't think so," Silas said, slowly descending the stairs, the shotgun now pointed casually in my direction. "You drew a lot of attention with that little fireworks display back there, and the crash. My guess is we've got company coming, and I prefer to deal with them from behind a locked door, with a human shield, preferably. My blood ran cold. A human shield. He was serious. He was going to use me. You're insane, I hissed. Just practical, he countered, reaching the bottom of the stairs. His eyes in the faint light were hard, utterly devoid of compassion. This ain't the old world, kid. There's no law, no kindness, just survival. And you look like you got some fight left in you. Maybe enough to buy me an hour or two. He gestured with the shotgun towards the back of the house. Kitchen's got a window. I'm going to watch. You're going to stand guard. And if you make a sound or try to run, I'll make sure those things outside get you before you even hit the driveway. My mind raced. Escape was impossible with him holding a shotgun. And the sounds outside, they were coming. Faint at first, but growing. The groans, the shuffling, drawn by the explosion, by the noise, by the scent of fresh human despair. What about them? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, gesturing vaguely upwards.
What were you feeding on? Silas grinned, a truly horrifying expression that twisted his gaunt face. Oh, that? That was just old Betsy, the neighbor's prize pig. Got caught in a blast. Good eating? What, you thought I was eating people? I ain't that far gone. Yet. He gestured with the shotgun again. Now, get to the kitchen and don't give me any trouble. Humanity's fate was sealed the moment we started eating each other, one way or another. Might as well make it useful. I stumbled towards the kitchen, my mind reeling. This was a whole new kind of horror. Not just the infected, but the living. The ones who saw other humans as nothing more than a resource. And I was trapped between two evils, one undead, one alive but just as monstrous. The kitchen was even darker, illuminated only by a faint, sickly green glow from what looked like a gas lantern on the counter. The air was thick with the smell of old grease and fear. The window, grimy and covered in cobwebs, offered a distorted view of the outside world. Silas followed me, keeping his distance, his shotgun ever present. He pointed to a small, rickety wooden chair by the window. Sit, watch, and report anything you see. I sank into the chair, the wood cold and hard beneath me. My body ached, my head throbbed, and my spirit felt utterly crushed. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. Outside, the groans were closer now, a collective, hungry sound that vibrated through the old farmhouse. I pressed my face against the grimy glass, trying to pierce the darkness. Shapes, shadows, too many to count. They were coming. I was a human shield, a decoy, and I was witnessing not just the evolution of the infected, but the rapid, terrifying de-evolution of humanity itself. The true fate of our species, sealed not by bites, but by choices. What would I choose when my turn came? Would I become like Silas? The thought filled me with a fresh wave of disgust and dread. The faint green light of the lantern cast long, dancing shadows around the kitchen. Silas moved to the counter, setting down his shotgun and beginning to meticulously clean a large hunting knife. The metallic shick-shick of the blade against the whetstone was the only sound in the room, cutting through the growing symphony of groans outside. My eyes strained against the grimy window pane. The darkness outside was almost absolute now, but I could make out shapes, indistinct and horrifying, moving at the edge of the property. Dozens of them, maybe more. The explosion had done its job. It had drawn them. But instead of scattering, they seemed to be converging, drawn by the twin beacons of the burning helicopter and, I suspected, the lingering scent of living flesh. My living flesh. I shivered, despite the oppressive heat and the sweat trickling down my back. The thought of being bait, of being used, was a visceral violation. Silas noticed my shudder. He looked up from his knife, a flicker of something that might have been amusement in his cold eyes. Getting cold feet, fresh meat? I'm not afraid of them, I lied, my voice cracking slightly. I'm afraid of you. He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Smart. That'll keep you alive longer than a bulletproof vest. He tapped the side of his head. Up here, that's where the real fight is. Don't think for a second those things out there are just dumb animals anymore. I've been watching them. I've watched zombies evolve. The phrase came to mind again, but now it was Silas saying it, echoing my own terrifying realization. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He paused his sharpening, leaning against the counter. Saw a herd of them last week, about 20, maybe 30, chasing a deer. They cornered it against a fence. One of the bigger ones, a real brawler, held its attention. The others circled. They didn't just rush, they flanked, like wolves. Didn't think they had that much brain power left, but they do, or something close enough to it. My blood ran cold. Flanking. That explained the coordinated movements of the evolved ones in the parking lot. This wasn't just instinct. This was rudimentary strategy, a terrifying leap. And it's not just that, Silas continued, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial tone. They're adapting to noise, to light. Used to be a loud bang, a bright flash. They'd go crazy, sure, but then they'd settle. Now they seem to remember. They learn where the threats are coming from. The ones that survive these things, they get smarter, or more cunning, whatever you want to call it. He gestured vaguely towards the window. That helicopter crash? It's a gold mine for 'em. They'll learn what fire does. They'll learn what explosions mean. They'll learn that big, noisy things often mean fresh food. A horrifying picture began to form in my mind. The old world, with its predictable threats, was gone. This new world was a constantly shifting battlefield against an enemy that learned, adapted, and grew more dangerous with every passing minute. Humanity's fate wasn't just sealed. It was being actively unraveled by an enemy that was evolving at an accelerated, terrifying rate. So what's the plan? I asked, the words bitter in my mouth. We just sit here and wait for them to figure out how to get in? Silas shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture. More or less. This old place is sturdy. Bars on the windows, steel reinforced door. Been prepping for something like this for years. They'll make a lot of noise. They'll try to break in, but they won't. Not tonight. Not if I can help it. He finally finished sharpening his knife, testing the edge with his thumb, a thin line of blood welling up. He didn't even flinch. Unless, of course, you give them an opening. His eyes met mine, hard and unwavering. The implied threat was clear. A soft scraping sound came from the front porch. Then a heavy thump against the wall. They were here. My breath hitched. I pressed my face closer to the window, trying to see through the gloom. Shapes coalesced. Dozens of them. They were pressing against the farmhouse walls, their collective weight testing the old structure. Their groans filled the night, a chilling, guttural chorus that promised agonizing death. Among them, I saw them, the faster ones, the evolved ones. They weren't just pressing, they were trying to climb. Not scaling the walls, not yet, but clawing, scrabbling, trying to get a purchase on the old weathered wood. They were testing weaknesses. They were learning. They're trying to climb, I whispered, my voice thick with dread. Silas nodded, without looking up. Told you, not so dumb anymore. They'll break an arm, maybe two, trying. But they'll keep at it. Persistence, that's their new strength. The farmhouse began to groan under the assault, a low, ominous creak that vibrated through the floorboards. It was old but sturdy, as Silas had claimed. But how long could it hold against a tireless, relentless, evolving foe? What if they find a way in? I asked, the question rhetorical, born of pure fear. Silas finally looked up, a grim smile playing on his lips.
Then we make them pay for every inch. And you, fresh meat, you'll be on the front lines. The fear I felt was profound, bone deep. I was not only a prisoner, but a sacrifice. Humanity's fate was sealed by the monsters outside, but my own fate was being decided by the monster inside. Hours passed, stretching into an eternity of terror. The assault on the farmhouse was relentless. The groans outside were a constant, maddening roar. The thumps and scrapes against the walls were like a morbid drumbeat, each one threatening to be the final one before the breach. I sat by the window, my eyes burning, watching the horrors unfold in the faint moonlight. I saw them try to climb, failing, falling, but others taking their place immediately. I saw them claw at the windows, their desperate fingers leaving long, bloody streaks on the grimy glass. They weren't just reacting, they were testing. Like a morbid, hungry flood, seeking the weakest point in the dam. This was more than animal instinct. It was a terrifying, primitive form of problem solving. I watched zombies evolve, from predictable threats to adaptable enemies. Silas, meanwhile, was a study in grim efficiency. He moved through the house, checking every lock, reinforcing every weak point with furniture and whatever scrap wood he could find. He had a surprising amount of pre-prepared barricades, boards with spikes hammered through them, metal plates bolted over windows. He truly had been preparing for this for years. Around midnight, a new, more unsettling sound emerged from the horde outside. Not just groans, but a collective, rhythmic sniffing. Louder now, more focused, like a pack of hounds on a scent. My blood ran cold. They were zeroing in on us. "They smell us," I whispered, my voice hoarse from hours of silence and suppressed fear. Silas, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, cleaning his rifle, looked up. "Took them long enough. They usually get onto the scent faster, but the blast probably muddled things." He sniffed the air, then wrinkled his nose. "And you, fresh meat, you're not exactly unscented. Been rolling around in ditches and gasoline, haven't you?" My cheeks burned, but I knew he was right. I was a beacon, a siren call to the hungry dead. The sniffing intensified, directly outside the kitchen window now. Something slammed against the glass with tremendous force. Not a claw, but a full-body impact. The old glass bowed inward, groaning, but held. Just barely. "They're getting bolder," Silas observed, his voice calm, almost detached. "And stronger. That one's got a kick." Then a high-pitched shriek, not human, something more akin to a wounded animal. One of the evolved ones, its face pressed against the glass, its eyes gleaming with a terrifying, primal intelligence. It slammed its head against the window again, then again, with a frantic, desperate energy. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The screamer," Silas said, without looking. "Or what's left of one. They're rare. Used to be a banshee-like scream that drew them all in. This one's different, more focused, more angry." The screamer continued its assault, its head slamming against the glass, the shrieks now interspersed with harsh, rattling breaths. The window groaned, threatening to give way. My heart pounded, a frantic drum in my ears. "What if it gets in?" I asked. Silas finally stood, picking up his shotgun. "Then it gets a lead injection. You get ready to do the same with that stick of yours." He gestured towards the fence post. "And if it's too much, you know what you are." His words hung in the air, a cold, brutal reminder of my role. Human shield, bait, cannon fodder. Humanity's fate, it seemed, was to be sacrificed, one by one. The window pane cracked, a thin spider-webbing fracture that spread outwards from the impact point. The screamer shrieked again, sensing the weakness, and slammed its head against it one last desperate time. The glass shattered inward with a violent crash. Shards of glass exploded into the kitchen, catching the green light of the lantern. The screamer, a gaunt, furious figure with matted hair and tattered clothes, lunged through the opening, its eyes fixed on me. It wasn't just hungry, it was enraged. Silas was faster. He raised his shotgun and fired. The blast ripped through the screamer's chest, sending it flying backward. It hit the floor with a sickening thud, convulsing, but not dead. Not yet. Its legs thrashed, its mouth still open in a silent shriek. "Head!" Silas barked, "always the head." He pumped the shotgun, but before he could fire again, two more hands, pale and grasping, reached through the shattered window. Then a head, followed by a shoulder. The horde was pouring in. My mind went blank. Pure instinct took over. I raised the fence post and swung, a wild, desperate arc. The wood connected with the head of the first infected pouring through the window, a dull, wet thud. It staggered but didn't fall. Its head snapped towards me, its jaws opening wide. Silas fired again, taking down the first one. Then, with a speed that belied his age, he reloaded, dropping shells onto the counter with a clatter. But they were too many. 3 more were already through the window, shambling towards us. Another was halfway in, struggling to squeeze its body through the narrow opening. "Back up," Silas shouted, his voice hard. "To the cellar." He fired, dropping one of the encroaching infected, then grabbed my arm, yanking me roughly. "Move, fresh meat, unless you want to become dog food." I stumbled backward, the fence post still clutched in my hand, my eyes wide with terror. The cellar! Another enclosed space, another trap. But it was better than being torn apart here and now. We scrambled through a narrow doorway hidden behind a pantry, Silas leading the way, his shotgun held ready. He kicked open a wooden door, revealing a set of steep, rickety stairs leading down into absolute darkness. The air that rushed up was cold, damp, and smelled of mildew and old earth. "Go," he commanded, pushing me forward. "Don't stop." I stumbled down the stairs, my feet slipping on the dusty wood, heart pounding. The sounds from the kitchen were deafening now, a cacophony of groans, thuds, and the unmistakable sound of tearing wood as more of them poured through the shattered window. Silas followed me down, then with a surprising burst of strength, he slammed the cellar door shut. He fumbled with a series of heavy wooden crossbars, dropping them into place with practiced ease. The thud, thud, thud of the crossbars being secured was punctuated by the desperate, frustrated groans of the infected on the other side. Then, silence. The oppressive, suffocating silence of a tomb. We were in the cellar, surrounded by darkness, by cold, by the smell of decay. My breath hitched. I could hear Silas breathing heavily beside me, the metallic tang of his gun oil a harsh counterpoint to the damp earth. "Well," he rasped, "that was close. See, you're still breathing, still useful." I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, but all I could do was lean against a cold stone wall, my legs shaking, my fence post still clutched in my hand. Humanity's fate might have been sealed, but for me, the nightmare was just beginning. The cellar, a small, stone-lined dungeon beneath the farmhouse, was a claustrophobic abyss. My eyes struggled to adjust to the inky blackness, a darkness so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. The air was cold, damp, and carried the heavy scent of mildew, old earth, and something vaguely metallic. Fear, my own, and perhaps the ghosts of those who had sheltered here before. Silas fumbled in his pockets, his movements efficient even in the dark. A small click, then a flickering orange glow. He lit a single, stubby candle, its weak flame barely pushing back the encroaching shadows. It cast long, dancing silhouettes on the rough stone walls, making the ancient room feel even more menacing. I saw him then, his face illuminated by the flickering light. Gaunt, lined, his eyes sharp and unforgiving. He truly looked like a survivor, forged in the fires of a world gone mad. He set the candle on a rickety wooden crate, its light revealing the sparse contents of the cellar. Shelves lined with dusty, unlabeled jars, a pile of old tools, and a single, rusted cot in the corner. "Welcome to my humble abode," Silas said, a grim smirk playing on his lips. "Been leaning to clean it, but, priorities." The sounds from above were muffled now, but still present. The insistent groans, the occasional thud, the scratching. They were still up there, still trying to get in, but the sturdy cellar door and its heavy crossbars were holding, for now. "How long will it hold?" I asked, my voice raw. Silas shrugged, picking up a can of what looked like beans from a shelf. "Depends. They get smart enough, they'll find a way eventually. But this place has kept me safe for weeks. They usually give up after a day or two, when something else comes along, or they get bored." He popped open the can with a small, specialized tool, then offered it to me. "Hungry? Fresh meat?" My stomach rumbled, a protesting growl in the silence. I hadn't eaten properly since the supermarket. But the thought of eating with this man, this cynical, cold-blooded survivor, made my gorge rise. "No thanks," I mumbled, pushing it away. Silas shrugged again, taking a large spoonful for himself. "Suit yourself. More for me. Don't say I didn't offer." He ate with a methodical, almost animalistic efficiency, his eyes never leaving me. I watched him, my mind still reeling from the events of the past hours. The supermarket, the evolved stock boy, the burning car, the helicopter crash, Silas and his callous practicality, the screamer in the kitchen. It was all too much, too fast, too brutal. "You said you've been watching them evolve," I said, needing to understand, needing to grasp at some shred of logic in this insane world. "What else have you seen? How else have they changed?" Silas paused, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at me for a long moment, as if deciding whether I was worth the information. "They're learning about traps," he finally said, his voice low. "Set up a tripwire once, with some bells. Used to be they'd stumble right into it, ring like a Christmas tree. Now, they avoid it. Not all of them, mind you. The slow ones still blunder, but the quick ones, they see it, or they smell it, or something. They detour." My blood ran cold. Traps. That implied an even higher level of intelligence, of sensory awareness and memory. Not just reacting, but anticipating. "And the sound," Silas continued, "used to be any loud noise was a beacon. They'd swarm. But now, I've seen some of them, the faster ones, they'll hesitate. They'll circle, like they're trying to figure out if the noise means food or if it means danger. They're learning to differentiate, becoming more selective." This was terrifying. This wasn't just a physical evolution, a few faster variants. This was a cognitive shift, however rudimentary. I watched zombies evolve from predictable obstacles into a strategic, learning opponent. Humanity's fate wasn't just sealed, it was being hunted by an enemy that was slowly, terrifyingly becoming smarter. "So, what happens when they get too smart?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "What happens when they're not just dumb animals anymore, but something more?" Silas finished his beans, wiped the can clean with his finger, and tossed it into a corner with a soft clang. He picked up his shotgun, checking the action with a practiced click. "Then," he said, his eyes meeting mine, cold and hard as stone, "we become them. Or we die trying to stop them from becoming us." His words were a chilling prophecy, a stark reminder of the ultimate, horrifying truth. If they truly evolved to that extent, if they gained true intelligence, if they could mimic us, outthink us, then there truly would be no hope. "So, what happens when they get too smart?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "What happens when they're not just dumb animals anymore, but something more?" Silas finished his beans, wiped the can clean with his finger, and tossed it into a corner with a soft clang. He picked up his shotgun, checking the action with a practiced click. Then, he said, his eyes meeting mine, cold and hard as stone, we become them, or we die trying to stop them from becoming us. His words were a chilling prophecy, a stark reminder of the ultimate, horrifying truth. If they truly evolved to that extent, if they gained true intelligence, if they could mimic us, outthink us, then there truly would be no hope.
Humanity's fate would be complete, utterly, irrevocably sealed. The thought settled over me, a suffocating blanket of despair. I slumped further against the cold stone, the flickering candlelight casting my terrified face in grotesque shadows. This was the new world, a world where the living were hunted by the evolving dead and betrayed by the surviving living. The hours dragged on, each minute an eternity of tense silence, punctuated by the muffled thumps and groans from above. I tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the old house, every distant wail carried on the wind sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I kept seeing their faces. Mr. Henderson, the stock boy, the screamer, twisted by hunger and rage, their eyes dead but strangely aware. Silas, on the other hand, seemed perfectly at ease. He sat cross-legged on the floor, rifle across his lap, eyes closed, breathing deeply. He wasn't sleeping, I could tell. He was simply existing, conserving energy, attuned to every subtle sound. He was a machine, honed for survival. A chilling example of how humanity had devolved to meet the challenge of the evolving dead. Just before dawn, the sounds from above began to change. The frantic banging lessened. The persistent sniffing waned. The groans, while still present, became more dispersed, more aimless. "They're leaving," I whispered, relief, pure and intoxicating, washing over me. Silas's eyes snapped open. He listened for a long moment, his head cocked, his expression unreadable. "Some of them," he finally conceded, "the dumb ones. They'll wander off, drawn by some other noise, some other scent. But the smart ones, they'll remember this place. They'll be back. And next time, they might bring friends." His words extinguished the fragile flame of hope that had briefly flickered within me. He was right. This wasn't an escape. It was just a temporary reprieve, a moment to breathe before the next wave, the next evolution. Humanity's fate wasn't decided in a single battle. It was a grinding war of attrition against an enemy that learned faster than we did. As the first sliver of gray light filtered through a small, grimy grate high on the cellar wall, Silas stood up, stretching his stiff limbs. "Time to go. Need to check the perimeter, see what they left behind." "Go?" I asked, confusion mixing with my exhaustion. "Where?" "Out," he said, gesturing vaguely. "I can't stay here. Too much attention. Too many of them know this place now. And I need supplies, more than I've got in this dusty hole." My stomach clenched. Out. Back into the world of the evolved dead. And with Silas. A terrifying prospect, but at least it was movement, action. Better than waiting to be eaten. Silas moved towards the cellar door, carefully disengaging the heavy crossbars. The wood creaked, the metal scraped, and then, with a soft thump, the door swung open, revealing a sliver of the old kitchen. The air that rushed in was stale, tinged with a metallic scent of blood and decay. The kitchen was a wreck. Shattered glass covered the floor, mingled with puddles of dark, congealed fluid. The counter where Silas had sharpened his knife was splintered, bearing the marks of desperate clawing. The shattered window was a gaping maw, a testament to the ferocity of the assault. But it was empty. The infected were gone, for now. Silas stepped out first, shotgun held ready, his eyes scanning every shadow. I followed, clutching my fence post, my senses on high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call sent a jolt of fear through me. The rest of the farmhouse was equally ravaged, furniture overturned, windows smashed, walls scarred with desperate claw marks. But no infected,
just the lingering stench of their presence, a foul perfume of death. We moved to the front door. Silas carefully opened it, just a crack, peering outside. The dawn light was stronger now, painting the desolate landscape in pale, eerie hues. "Clear," he said, his voice low. "For now." We stepped out onto the porch, into the chill morning air. The scene was apocalyptic. The burning helicopter was a smoking husk in the distance, a black scar against the pale sky. The parking lot of the supermarket was littered with debris, and beyond that, the city still smoldered, plumes of dark smoke rising like funeral pyres. The farmhouse yard itself was a graveyard. Dozens of infected bodies lay sprawled on the grass, silent testimony to Silas's defenses. Many of them were the slow, shambling kind, but among them I saw 3 of the faster, more aggressive variants, their limbs twisted, their skulls shattered. And then I saw it. One of them, not dead, not moving, just lying there. But its eyes, they were open, and they were watching. My blood ran cold. It wasn't dead. It was injured, but it wasn't groaning. It wasn't thrashing. It was still, and its eyes, though milky, seemed to be tracking our movements, learning, remembering. "Silas," I whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. "That one." He followed my gaze, his eyes narrowed. "Clever girl. Noticed that one myself. Been watching us since we came out." He raised his shotgun. "Trying to play dead, are you? Not on my watch." He fired. The blast ripped through the injured infected's head, finally silencing its silent observation. But the image of its calculating eyes, its patient stillness, was seared into my mind. This was the next stage of their evolution. Not just speed, not just coordination, but cunning, patience, deception. Humanity's fate wasn't just sealed, it was being dissected by an enemy that understood strategy. "They're getting smarter, aren't they?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Silas simply nodded, his face grim. "Faster, stronger, and now they're learning to play dead." "What's next? Talking? Building barricades of their own?" He didn't sound amused anymore. There was a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. "We need to move," he said, his voice flat. "Now, before the others come back, before they figure out what that one figured out." He turned, leading the way towards the rusted pickup truck in the driveway. It looked like a derelict, a rusted husk of metal. But Silas, ever the prepper, might have a trick up his sleeve. "This thing run?" I asked, desperation clinging to my voice. "Might," he grunted, fumbling with a set of keys. "Gotta get out of this city. Too many of them know this area now. And after that crash, it's a feeding ground." He opened the driver's side door, revealing a surprisingly clean interior. He slid behind the wheel, inserted the key, and turned. The engine coughed, sputters, then caught with a surprising roar. The sound was deafening in the silence, a brazen challenge to the lingering dead. "Get in," Silas barked, "unless you want to be dinner." I scrambled into the passenger seat, my eyes darting frantically to the tree line. The sound of the engine was a magnet. I could almost feel their collective awareness shifting, turning towards us. Silas slammed the truck into reverse, sending gravel flying, then spun it around and floored it. The old pickup lurched forward, bouncing over the uneven ground, leaving the ravaged farmhouse behind. As we sped down the dirt road, leaving a trail of dust in our wake, I glanced back at the farmhouse. The dead lay scattered across the lawn, silent witnesses to the night's horrors. And in the distance, the city still burned, a monument to a world that was no more. But my gaze lingered on the edge of the tree line. A flicker of movement. Just a shadow. But it was there, and it was watching. The zombies had evolved, and humanity's fate was sealed. But as long as I was breathing, as long as I could run, I would fight against that fate, even if it meant becoming as cold and hard as Silas. The journey out of the immediate vicinity of the city was a blur of grinding gears, rattling suspension, and constant frantic vigilance. Silas drove with a grim, focused intensity, his eyes sweeping the desolate landscape, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror. I gripped the dashboard, my knuckles white, my own eyes constantly darting, searching for movement in the periphery, for any sign of the evolving horrors that now populated the world. We passed abandoned cars, some overturned, some stripped, some with their doors ajar, silently screaming tales of desperate escapes and swift, brutal ends. Empty gas stations, their pumps ripped open, their convenience stores ransacked. Small towns, their main streets eerily silent. Storefronts shattered, a few shambling figures occasionally visible in the distance. The air was thick with the scent of decay, of wood smoke, and a faint acrid tang that reminded me of the zombie stock boy in the supermarket. "They're drawn to movement," Silas grunted, breaking the silence as we swerved around a stalled bus. "But the smart ones, they learned patterns. Saw a group once, laid up along a highway, waited. When a car came by, not even a horde, just 5 or 6 of them, they'd burst out from the trees, ambush. Not very effective against a moving vehicle, but it's a start." My stomach clenched. Ambush. Not just reacting, but planning. I watched zombies evolve from random occurrences to strategic threats. The idea that they could even conceive of an ambush, however rudimentary, was terrifying. It meant they were learning to predict, to anticipate. And that meant humanity's fate was far more precarious than I dared to imagine. "What do you mean, a start?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Silas gave a grim chuckle. "Means they'll get better, stronger, faster, more coordinated. One day they'll figure out how to disable vehicles, how to set up a proper roadblock, how to use their numbers like a proper army. And when they do, it's game over." His words hung heavy in the cab, a cold, unshakable truth. The full implications of their evolution were slowly, horrifyingly becoming clear. This wasn't just a physical plague. It was a mental one, spreading a rudimentary collective intelligence that mimicked humanity's own worst instincts. We drove for what felt like hours, deeper and deeper into the countryside. The familiar landmarks of the world before were gone, replaced by a landscape of desolation and fear. Fields lay fallow, crops rotten on the vine. Houses stood empty, their windows like vacant eyesores. Every now and then a plume of smoke on the horizon, a distant reminder that somewhere others were still fighting, still burning. As the afternoon sun began to dip towards the horizon, Silas finally slowed the truck. We were on a narrow, almost forgotten dirt road, winding through dense woods. The trees, thick and ancient, created a tunnel of shadows. The air here was cooler, cleaner, smelling of pine and damp earth. A welcome change from the stench of the city, but just as unsettling in its silence. "Cabin," Silas said, gesturing vaguely into the trees. "Another one of my boat holes. Smaller, harder to find. Nobody knows about it." I looked at the dense woods, at the encroaching shadows. It felt like walking into the maw of a beast, but I had no choice. We parked the truck in a thicket of overgrown bushes, concealing it as best we could. Then Silas led me on foot, deeper into the woods, following a barely discernible deer path. He moved with a practiced stealth, his rifle held ready, his eyes constantly scanning. I tried to emulate him, but my bruised body and racing heart made every step a clumsy struggle. After about 20 minutes of hiking, the trees thinned slightly, revealing a small, unassuming cabin. Log walls, a rusted tin roof, a small porch. It looked like something out of a forgotten fairy tale, but in this new world, it was a sanctuary. Silas moved to the front door, carefully checking the locks, then opened it slowly. The cabin was small, a single room with a small loft above. A fireplace dominated one wall, a rustic table and 2 chairs stood in the center, and a narrow bed occupied the corner. It was sparse, but it felt safe. It felt human. "Welcome to your next temporary prison," Silas said, a hint of his old cynicism in his voice. He dropped his gear on the floor, then moved to the windows, pulling back heavy homemade shutters. Sunlight, filtering through the dense trees, finally lit the interior. "No power, of course," he continued, "but I've got a well outside for water, firewood, and plenty of MREs." He gestured to a stack of military ration packs in a corner. "Been stocking this place for years. Never thought I'd need it, but here we are." I sank into one of the wooden chairs, my entire body aching with exhaustion. For the first time in what felt like days, I felt a semblance of peace, a fragile, fleeting sense of security. Silas built a small fire in the fireplace, its warmth slowly radiating through the cabin, pushing back the cold dampness. The crackle of the burning wood, the earthy smell of the smoke were comforting. He heated some water, then made instant coffee, offering me a mug. I took it, my hands trembling slightly. The bitter, lukewarm liquid was a shock to my system, but the warmth was welcome. I watched Silas hunched over the fire, his face illuminated by the dancing flames. He was a ruthless, cynical man, but he was also the reason I was still alive. A complicated, uncomfortable truth. "Thank you," I said, the words surprising even myself. He looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "For what? Keeping you alive so you can be bait later?" "For not leaving me," I countered. "For not shooting me back at the farmhouse. For letting me be here." He grunted, then turned back to the fire. "Don't get sentimental, fresh meat. Sentimentality gets you killed. We're just a mutually beneficial arrangement. You're useful, for now. Don't forget that." His words were harsh, but I understood. In this world, there was no room for weakness, no time for feelings, just survival. Humanity's fate was sealed by its inability to adapt, but individuals like Silas, twisted though they might be, were the exceptions. They were the ones who would inherit this new, brutal world. As darkness fell, Silas sealed the shutters, plunging the cabin into a cozy, fire-lit gloom. He offered me an MRE, a bland but filling meal of mystery meat and dehydrated vegetables. I ate it slowly, savoring every bite, the first real food I'd had in days. He then laid out his rules. No unnecessary noise, no opening the shutters, no going outside without him, and always, always be ready to fight. "They're out there," he said, his voice low, his eyes sweeping the shadowy corners of the cabin. "Even here, they find their way. The smart ones, they remember where humans hide. And the forests, they're getting good at moving through the trees. They're evolving to the environment, not just to us." His words sent a chill down my spine. Evolving to the environment. That meant they were becoming more diverse, more specialized. Forest zombies, urban zombies, what else? Mountain zombies? Aquatic zombies? The possibilities were endless, and each one more terrifying than the last. Humanity's fate was sealed not by a single enemy, but by 1,000 evolving horrors. "Get some rest," Silas finally said, gesturing to the cot. "You'll need it. Tomorrow, we go hunting, for supplies, and for knowledge." Knowledge. The word resonated with me. He was right. We needed to understand them, to understand how they were evolving, because if we didn't, we were already dead. I lay on the cot, the rough blankets surprisingly warm. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the world was silent, save for the whisper of the wind through the trees. But I knew they were out there, watching, learning, evolving. And I, a lone survivor in a desolate world, had watched zombies evolve to a terrifying degree. And the realization that humanity's fate was truly sealed by their relentless, terrifying adaptation was a weight that pressed down on my very soul. I closed my eyes, but sleep was a distant dream, chased away by the horrors I had seen and the chilling anticipation of what new evolution the dawn would bring. My mind raced, trying to process it all, to find a pattern, a weakness, anything that could give us a fighting chance. But all I saw was endless adaptation,
a relentless, terrifying march towards a form of intelligence that would surely consume us all. I had no idea what new nightmare awaited me, but I knew one thing: I had to keep watching. I had to keep learning, because that was the only way to even hope to survive against an enemy that never stopped evolving. The crackle of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl were the only sounds that broke the oppressive silence of the cabin. I lay on the cot, my eyes wide open, staring at the rough-hewn ceiling. Sleep was an impossible luxury, my mind replaying the horrors of the last few days, reanalyzing every detail of the evolving dead. I watched zombies evolve. The phrase was branded into my consciousness, a terrifying constant. Silas, perched on a stool by the fire, seemed to be in a similar state of restless vigilance. He wasn't asleep, merely still, his eyes fixed on the embers, his rifle across his lap. He was a stark reminder of the brutal realities of this new world, a survivalist honed to a cruel, efficient edge. As the first hint of false dawn painted the sky a faint, bruised purple, Silas stirred. "Time to go," he grunted, his voice rough with disuse. "The early bird avoids well, you get the picture." My muscles screamed in protest as I pushed myself off the cot, my bruises a dull ache. The air was frigid, cutting through my thin clothes. I grabbed a fence post, its splintered wood a pathetic comfort. Silas, meanwhile, was all business. He methodically packed a small backpack with MREs, water bottles, and a few medical supplies. He checked his weapons, loaded extra magazines into his pouches. His movements were fluid, precise, born of years of practice. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Down to the river," he replied, without looking up. "Got a small boat hidden there. Can use it to get around. Quieter than the truck, and gives us an advantage against the ground pounders." The river, a new element, a new environment for the evolving dead. My stomach clenched. "Have you seen them in the water?" Silas paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Bits and pieces, float downstream, bloated, but nothing active, not yet. But they're learning. Give 'em time. They'll figure it out. They always do." His words were a chilling prophecy. The thought of water-bound zombies, silent and deadly beneath the surface, sent a shiver down my spine. Humanity's fate was sealed by an enemy that relentlessly adapted to every challenge, every environment. We left the cabin, Silas locking the heavy door behind us. The woods were still shrouded in a thick mist, making every tree, every shadow seem like a potential threat. Silas moved like a ghost, his steps silent, his eyes constantly sweeping the surroundings. I, on the other hand, stumbled, my fear making me clumsy, every snapped twig a thunderclap. "Quiet," Silas hissed, grabbing my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You'll draw them." I nodded, biting back a retort. He was right. My survival depended on his knowledge, his ruthlessness. A bitter pill to swallow. We moved through the forest for what felt like an hour, the mist gradually thinning as the sun rose higher. The sounds of the forest were slowly returning, the chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves. But they were different now, tainted by the knowledge of what lurked within. Every snapping twig could be an animal, or it could be one of them. Suddenly, Silas froze. His hand shot out, grabbing my shoulder, holding me still. His eyes were fixed on something ahead. "What is it?" I whispered, my heart pounding. "Movement," he replied, his voice barely audible. "Not a deer. Too tall. Too jerky." My eyes strained, trying to pierce the gloom of the trees. Then I saw it. A figure, silhouetted against the rising sun, moving with that familiar, lurching gait. It was partially obscured by the mist, but its shape was unmistakable. And infected. But it wasn't alone. Two more emerged from the trees, flanking it. Not just randomly moving. They were coordinating, herding, like they were looking for something, or someone. My blood ran cold. This was what Silas had talked about, the pack hunters, the evolving intelligence. I watched zombies evolve from individual threats to a collective, strategic force. They're searching,
Silas whispered, his finger on the trigger of his rifle. They figured out scent trails, followed a deer trail. Now they're fanning out. The three infected moved with a disturbing efficiency, slowly sweeping through the woods, their dead eyes fixed on the ground, on the subtle disturbances in the undergrowth. They were hunting, and we were in their territory. Silas slowly, carefully began to back away, pulling me with him. We moved silently, step to agonizing step, trying to put distance between us and the hunting party. My heart pounded, a frantic drum in my ears. Every muscle in my body was screaming for me to run, but I forced myself to match Silas's slow, deliberate retreat. Suddenly, a twig snapped under my foot. A small sound, but in the silence, it was a gunshot. The three infected froze. Their heads snapped up, their ruined faces turning towards us. Their eyes, milky and dead, seemed to fix on our position. Then, the lead one, a hulking figure in torn work clothes, let out a piercing shriek. Not a groan, a call, a signal. "Run!" Silas roared, pushing me forward. "Go, to the river!"
Now! He opened fire, 3 rapid shots from his rifle, dropping the lead infected with a sickening thud. But the other 2 were already charging, their movements a horrifying blur, faster than anything I'd seen before. I ran, blindly through the dense undergrowth, branches whipping at my face, tearing at my clothes. The sounds of the chase were deafening behind me, Silas's rifle fire, the guttural snarls of the charging infected, my own ragged gasps for breath. "Left!" Silas shouted. "River's left!" I veered left, stumbling, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. The sound of rushing water grew louder, a desperate beacon in the chaos. Then, a sudden, horrifying insight. The shrieks, the calls, they weren't just signals, they were drawing others, communicating. This wasn't just a pack, it was a network. I watched zombies evolve from basic pack hunters to a connected, communicating threat. Humanity's fate wasn't just sealed, it was being dissected by an enemy that understood coordination. I burst out of the tree line, gasping, onto a narrow, rocky bank. The river was before me, wide and fast-flowing, its dark waters churning. A small, camouflaged boat, a simple fishing skiff, was tied to a tree stump. Silas was right behind me, firing over my shoulder, dropping another of the charging infected. "Get in!" he roared, reloading his rifle with lightning speed. "Untie the rope!" I fumbled with the knot, my fingers numb with terror, the rope slick with morning dew. The last infected, a gaunt, furious female, lunged at me, its jaw snapping. I screamed, pulling back, narrowly avoiding its bite. Silas fired, taking it in the head. It dropped, convulsing, then slid down the bank and into the rushing river, disappearing beneath the dark waters. "The rope!" Silas barked, his voice urgent. "Now!" I finally untied the knot, shoving the boat away from the bank. Silas jumped in, landing with a grunt, then immediately began to paddle with a single oar, pushing us away from the shore. We drifted downstream, the current catching us, pulling us away from the horrors of the forest. I lay in the bottom of the boat, gasping for breath, my body shaking uncontrollably. The sounds of the forest slowly faded, replaced by the rush of the river, the creak of the oar. "Close call," Silas grunted, his breathing heavy. He looked back at the shore, his eyes narrowed. "They're getting faster and smarter, much smarter." I didn't respond. I couldn't. All I could do was stare at the churning waters, imagining what new, horrifying evolution might be taking place beneath the surface. Humanity's fate was sealed by an enemy that never stopped learning, never stopped adapting. And I, a terrified survivor, was just along for the ride, watching the nightmare unfold. I closed my eyes, but the image of those communicating, coordinating horrors was seared into my mind. What would they do next? How would they evolve? And could we ever truly escape them, or just delay the inevitable? The river carried us downstream, a silent, relentless current, pulling us further from the ravaged forest and deeper into the unknown. The small fishing skiff, camouflaged and quiet, was a precarious haven, bobbing gently on the dark waters. The sun was higher now, its pale light reflecting off the ripples, but doing little to dispel the gloom that clung to my spirit. I sat huddled in the bow, the rough wooden planks digging into my bruised body. Silas in the stern paddled with a steady, rhythmic stroke, his eyes scanning both banks. He was a sentinel, constantly vigilant, always searching for the next threat, the next sign of the evolving dead. "They're learning the landscape," Silas said, his voice low, breaking the silence. "The forest was full of them. Used to be they'd stick to the roads, to open ground. Now, they're adapting, becoming stealthier, harder to spot." My gaze swept the riverbanks, dense trees, gnarled roots reaching into the water, overhanging branches forming dark tunnels. It was the perfect ambush spot. The thought made my stomach churn. Not just fast, not just coordinated, but stealthy. I watched zombies evolve from lumbering targets to insidious predators, masters of their environment. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a desperate game of hide and seek where the seeker always won. "So the river's not safe either," I stated, the words flat, devoid of emotion. Silas grunted. "Nothing safe, fresh meat, just less dangerous, for now. But they're learning the water. Saw a few down by the old bridge, half submerged, just standing there, like they were waiting. The current's strong, washes them away eventually, but it's a start." The image of half-submerged figures waiting patiently in the dark waters sent a shiver down my spine. The river, once a symbol of escape, now felt like another potential trap, another frontier for their relentless evolution. Humanity's fate was sealed by an enemy that relentlessly adapted to every element, every hiding place. We drifted for what felt like hours, passing abandoned docks, sunken boats, and the occasional decaying corpse caught in the river's embrace. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the dip of Silas's oar and the rush of the water. Then a new sound, faint at first, but growing, a distant thumping. Not a helicopter this time, more mechanical, more guttural. Silas's head snapped up, his eyes narrowed, searching the sky. What the hell is that? The thumping grew louder, closer. Then a dark shape emerged from behind the bend in the river. A large, dilapidated barge, long abandoned, now covered in rust and grime. It was drifting downstream, slowly, aimlessly, and on its deck. My blood ran cold. Dozens of them. Infected, packed together, their bodies swaying with the motion of the barge, their groans a low collective hum that carried across the water. They weren't piloting it, they were simply passengers, carried by the current, a floating island of death heading straight for us. "No," I whispered, pure terror gripping me. "No, no." Silas cursed under his breath. "Damn it, they're using the current now. Figured out how to drift. Not piloting, no, but still effective." This was a nightmare, not just evolving individually, but evolving in their methods of dispersal, using natural forces. I watched zombies evolve from land-bound threats to maritime horrors, carried by the very elements. Humanity's fate was sealed by an enemy that was not only adapting, but exploiting its environment with terrifying accidental ingenuity. The barge was closer now, a hulking, silent menace. Its groans were louder, more insistent, a morbid symphony on the water. Silas grabbed a second oar, frantically paddling, trying to steer us out of its path. "We need to get to shore," he barked, his voice strained. "Now!" He angled the boat sharply, digging the oars deep into the water, pulling with all his strength. My own fear lent me a desperate strength, and I joined him, grabbing a spare paddle, clumsily pushing against the current. The barge, slow but inexorable, was gaining on us. We could see their faces now, their dead eyes fixed on us, their mouths opening and closing in a silent, hungry chorus.
A few of them, the faster, evolved ones, were at the edge of the barge, their fingers clawing at the metal, their bodies twitching with a desperate hunger. "Faster!" Silas roared, his muscles straining. "Faster, damn you!" Our small skiff bucked and swayed, fighting the current, trying to reach the shore. The bank was still a good 50 yards away, thick with trees and tangled undergrowth. A difficult landing, but our only chance. A loud creak came from the barge. One of the infected, a hulking brute, had managed to climb onto a rusted crane that jutted out over the water. It swayed precariously, its weight testing the rotting metal. Then, with a grunt, it launched itself. My eyes widened in horror. It was a leap, a desperate, impossible leap. Not just a mindless lunge. It had calculated the distance. It had aimed. It plunged into the water, a sickening splash that sent spray high into the air. For a second, it disappeared. Then its head broke the surface. It was flailing, clumsily, but it was moving, swimming, slowly, inefficiently, but swimming nonetheless.
"They're learning to swim!" I shrieked, pure terror seizing me. "Silas, it's swimming!" Silas saw it too, his face grim. "Damn it, I knew it! Give them time! They always figure it out!" He pulled the oar from the water, grabbed his rifle, and fired. The shot caught the swimming infected in the head. It went limp, sinking beneath the churning waters. But the others, the hundreds of them on the barge, they had seen it. They had witnessed their comrades' desperate, albeit clumsy, attempt to reach us. And the sight of one of their own breaking through a new barrier, however briefly, seemed to galvanize them. Their groans intensified, transforming into a roar of collective hunger. More of them, the faster ones, began to drop into the water, splashing clumsily, struggling against the current, but still moving. It wasn't coordinated, not yet, but it was a desperate, collective effort. They were learning, adapting, evolving. "This is it," I whispered, pure despair settling over me. Humanity's fate was sealed. There's nowhere left to run. Silas didn't answer. He was paddling frantically, his muscles straining, his eyes fixed on the shore. We were still too far. The current was too strong. The barge was too close. And then, a new sound, a different sound, not groans, not screams, but a rhythmic, grating thump, thump, coming from the shore. My eyes darted to the bank. Through a gap in the trees, I saw them. Not the dead, people, survivors. 3 of them, armed with axes and blunt weapons, hacking at the thick undergrowth, clearing a path. They were motioning frantically, urging us towards them. Hope. A dangerous, fragile thing. But in this moment, it was a lifeline. "Silas," I screamed, "over there, people!" He saw them too, his face a mask of surprise. He angled the boat, pulling with renewed vigor. The barge was nearly upon us now, its shadow falling across our small skiff, its groans a deafening roar. More infected were dropping into the water, a dozen, 2 dozen, splashing, flailing, slowly but surely making their way towards us. The survivors on shore, 2 men and a woman, were still hacking at the brush, desperately trying to clear a landing spot. They had seen the barge, they had seen the evolving horror, and they were risking their lives to help us. "Hold on," Silas yelled, as the bow of our boat finally scraped against the muddy bank. He lunged out, scrambling onto shore, rifle held ready. "Cover me!" I followed, clambering out of the boat, my legs shaking, my eyes fixed on the approaching horde in the water. The 3 survivors immediately converged on us, their faces grim, their weapons raised. "Quick!" one of the men shouted, a burly figure with a beard. "They're almost here!" We plunged into the clearing they had made, Silas covering our retreat with his rifle, firing precise shots into the struggling, swimming infected. The sound of his rifle was sharp, authoritative, cutting through the chaos. But the barge was still drifting, and the hundreds of them on deck were still groaning, still watching, still waiting.
and the few that had learned to swim, however clumsily, were relentlessly making their way towards us, their dead eyes fixed on the living. We were safe on shore, for now, but the image of the floating island of death and the desperate swimming horrors was seared into my mind. I watched zombies evolve, not just individually, but collectively, adapting to new environments, new methods of attack. Humanity's fate was sealed by an enemy that never stopped learning, never stopped coming, and the fight, I knew, was far from over. I looked at the three new faces, their expressions a mix of grim determination and weary hope. The burly man with the beard, the quieter younger man with intense eyes, and the woman, slender but with a formidable axe gripped in her hand. They were survivors, like Silas, like me. A small, desperate spark of humanity in a world consumed by the evolving dead. "Name's Marcus," the bearded man grunted, gesturing to the other two. "This is Kai, and that's Anya. You two just crash-landed in our little sanctuary. You got a name, river rats?" I'm Alex," I stammered, my voice still trembling. "This is Silas." Silas merely nodded, his eyes scanning the river. The barge was slowly drifting past, its grotesque cargo of groaning, swaying infected, a horrifying monument to their newfound method of dispersal. A few of the swimming dead were still flailing in the water, but the current was strong, slowly pulling them away. "Thanks for the assist," Silas said, his voice clipped. "Didn't think anyone was still out this far." "Didn't think anyone was still alive, period," Anya retorted, her voice sharp, her gaze unwavering. "We heard the explosion yesterday, saw the smoke, figured we'd see what washed up." Her eyes lingered on me, then Silas. "And what kind of cargo you got on that boat? Looks like you attracted a whole damn shipping lane of 'em." Silas scoffed. "Just trying to get away from a city full of the evolving bastards. They're getting smart, you know, figured out how to use the current. What's next, building rafts?" Marcus whistled, a low, grim sound. "Drifting? That's a new one. We've seen 'em get faster, seen 'em get smarter about traps. Even saw a group that seemed to coordinate a search pattern in the fields. But drifting? That's a whole new level of humanity's fate was sealed kind of horror." He understood. He, too, had watched zombies evolve. The chilling phrase, no longer just my internal mantra, now shared by others. A grim, shared reality. "Come on," Marcus urged, gesturing towards a narrow path deeper into the woods. "We're not safe out here, not with that going by." He nodded towards the slowly receding barge. "They'll remember this place. They'll send out scouts." We followed them, deeper into the dense forest. Their sanctuary, a small, heavily fortified clearing, was nestled between ancient trees. A crude wall of logs and sharpened stakes encircled a few tents and a small communal fire pit. It was basic, but clearly well maintained, a testament to their dedication to survival. A small dog, a wiry terrier mix, bounded out from one of the tents, barking furiously. Kai immediately quieted it, a gentle hand on its head. "Good boy, Buster. Just friends. Mostly." He glanced at Silas, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "Welcome to our humble abode," Anya said, a wry smile touching her lips. "River's Edge. It's not much, but it's home. For now." She led us to the fire pit, offering us stew from a bubbling pot. The aroma was intoxicating, rich and savory. Real food, not an MRE. I almost wept with gratitude. As we ate, huddled around the crackling fire, sharing stories of the nightmare world, the conversation inevitably turned to the evolving dead. They had seen similar things, the faster ones, the runners, the seekers who showed rudimentary tracking skills, and a new, disturbing variant they called mimics. "Mimics?" I asked, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Anya's face grew grim. "Yeah, heard about them from another group. They don't groan. They make sounds, like human sounds. Crying, whimpering, little kids' voices sometimes. Draws you in, gets you to lower your guard. Then they spring." My blood ran cold. This was it.
The ultimate evolution, not just physical or behavioral, but deceptive, mimicking humanity itself. This wasn't just a threat to our bodies, it was a threat to our souls, to our very compassion. I watched zombies evolve from mindless monsters to insidious deceivers, weaponizing our empathy. This was truly how humanity's fate was sealed, not by overwhelming force, but by the corruption of our very nature. They're getting smarter about the hunting, Kai added, his young face etched with weariness. Not just faster, but patient. We saw one a few days ago, just stood still, half hidden by a bush for hours, like a statue, until a rabbit came by, then gone, like a flash. Patience, deception, communication, coordination, and now mimicry. The evolution was accelerating, manifesting in more insidious, more terrifying ways. What do we do? I asked, the question rhetorical, born of pure despair. How do we fight something that keeps changing, keeps learning, keeps getting smarter? Silas, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. We learn faster. We adapt quicker. We become better hunters than they are, or we die. His words were harsh, but they carried a brutal truth. He's right, Marcus said, looking at me. We can't outrun them. We can't outfight them with just brute force. We have to outthink them. And we have to stick together. Isolation gets you killed out here. His words resonated. I had seen what isolation could do. It turned men into Silases. It turned hope into despair. As darkness fell, a new quiet descended upon River's Edge. The distant sounds of the evolving dead were just that, distant. But the horror of their rapid, terrifying evolution and the chilling implications of the mimics weighed heavily on my mind. Humanity's fate was sealed, yes, but perhaps, just perhaps, by fighting together, by sharing knowledge, by refusing to give up, we could carve out a small, desperate corner of survival. I curled up by the fire, the warmth a small comfort against the cold despair. Silas was already on watch, rifle in hand, his silhouette stark against the flickering flames. Marcus, Kai, and Anya made their own preparations for the night, their movements efficient, practiced. We were 5 humans, a tiny island of life in an ocean of death. And we had watched zombies evolve to a terrifying, insidious degree. The fate of humanity was sealed by this relentless, adaptive enemy. But as long as we breathed, as long as we fought, we would defy that fate, 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day at a time. The world was darker now, not just from the setting sun, but from the encroaching, evolving horror. What new form of terror would they unleash upon us tomorrow? The thought was a chilling companion in the long, silent night. I knew I couldn't rest, not yet. I had to watch, I had to learn, because the next evolution could be the one that finally broke us all. The next morning at River's Edge began with a shared silence, thick with unspoken fears. The revelations about the mimics, about the evolving cunning of the infected, had left a heavy mark. As the sun slowly began to filter through the leaves, painting the clearing in dappled light, we gathered around the cold ashes of the fire, sipping bitter instant coffee. So, the plan, Marcus said, breaking the silence, his voice gruff. We need more supplies. Food's okay for now, but medical supplies are low. Batteries, ammunition, and information. Always more information. There's an old ranger station about a day's hike east, Kai offered, pointing on a crude map drawn on a piece of cardboard. Might have some old radios, spare parts, maybe even a vehicle if we're lucky. Silas grunted. Ranger stations. First place survivors hit. Probably picked clean. Or worse, a trap. Could be, Anya conceded, but it's better than nothing. And if there's a signal booster, we might be able to pick up something. Any kind of broadcast. See if anyone else is out there. The idea of other survivors, a wider world beyond our small clearing, was a potent lure. But the risks were immense. Every new location was a gamble. Every new encounter a potential disaster. I watched zombies evolve, not just in the wild, but in the ruins of our civilization. "I'll go," Silas said, surprising us all. "Alone, less noise, less risk, and if it's a trap, only one dies." "No," Marcus countered. "We move as a team. We've always moved as a team. 2 will go. Less chance of getting overwhelmed, better chance of covering each other. Kai and Anya, you stay and guard the camp. Alex, you're with me." My stomach clenched. Me? Going out? My experience was limited to panic sprints and desperate swings of a fence post. But I knew I couldn't stay. I had to keep moving. I had to keep learning. I had to keep watching zombies evolve if I had any hope of understanding them. Silas's eyes met mine, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. He didn't protest Marcus's choice. Perhaps he saw me as a learning tool, a fresh perspective, or perhaps a disposable asset. We spent the next hour preparing. Marcus, a meticulous planner, went over the route, highlighting potential threats, escape routes. We armed ourselves, Marcus with a shotgun and a machete, Silas with his rifle and knife, and I, to my surprise, was given a small, rusty revolver with 6 rounds. It felt heavy and alien in my hand. "Aim for the head," Marcus instructed, his voice grave. "Only thing that puts them down for good. And conserve ammo. It's gold now." Anya handed me a small backpack with water, a few MREs, and a basic first aid kit. "Stay safe, Alex. Don't take unnecessary risks, and listen to Marcus." Her eyes were kind, but her expression was firm. As we set off, leaving the relative safety of River's Edge, the forest felt even more alive, more menacing. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig sent a jolt of fear through me. The silence, broken only by our cautious footsteps, was oppressive, heavy with the weight of unseen threats. Marcus moved with a quiet confidence, his shotgun held ready, his eyes constantly sweeping the tree line. He was a natural leader, calm under pressure, seasoned by countless encounters with the dead. I tried to emulate his stealth, to match his pace, but my inexperience made me clumsy, my fear making my movements jerky. "Remember what Silas said," Marcus whispered, as we navigated a particularly dense thicket. "They're adapting to the environment. They're not just stumbling through anymore. They're learning the landscape, using cover. Don't expect them to announce themselves." His words sent a chill down my spine. The image of the seekers and the mimics flashed in my mind. Not just predictable threats, but cunning, deceptive predators. Humanity's fate was sealed by an enemy that exploited not just our weaknesses, but our very humanity. We hiked for hours, the forest slowly transitioning from dense woods to more open, rocky terrain. The air grew thinner, the silence more profound. The ranger station, according to the map, was nestled in a small valley, hidden from the main roads. As we approached the valley rim, Marcus held up a hand, signaling a halt. He dropped to one knee, scanning the landscape below with a pair of battered binoculars. I crouched beside him, my heart pounding, straining to see what he saw. "Damn it," he muttered, his voice grim. "Just as Silas said, picked clean, and then some." He handed me the binoculars. I raised them to my eyes, focusing on the small clearing below. The ranger station was a ruin, windows shattered, doors torn from their hinges, walls scorched. It looked like it had been hit by a bomb, or a battle. And around it, scattered haphazardly, were bodies, human bodies. Not reanimated, just dead. Too many to count. Some still clutched weapons. Others lay where they fell, mid-sprint, mid-fight. A massacre. But the most chilling sight wasn't the dead. It was the living, the unliving. A small group of infected moved among the ruins, not aimlessly, but with a strange, methodical purpose. They weren't feeding, they were scavenging. One of them, a gaunt figure in a tattered uniform, picked up a discarded rifle, then let it fall with a clatter. Another dragged a metal crate across the ground, its contents spilling out. They weren't using the tools, they were just interacting with them, learning, trying to understand.
And then I saw it. A figure, larger than the others, moving with a chillingly fluid grace. It moved into the shell of the ranger station, disappeared for a moment, then emerged, carrying something in its arms. A duffel bag. It set it down, then seemed to inspect it, its ruined head cocked to one side, its dead eyes staring at the fabric. My breath hitched. This wasn't just physical evolution. This was a horrifying, nascent intelligence. They weren't just reacting to stimuli. They were exploring. They were learning. They were actively trying to understand the world around them. I watched zombies evolve from predators to rudimentary explorers, and the implications were terrifying. Humanity's fate was sealed not by a tide of mindless flesh, but by an enemy that was slowly, inexorably becoming something more.
Something truly alien and horrifying. "They're learning about objects," I whispered, my voice thick with terror. "They're trying to figure out how things work." Marcus snatched the binoculars back, his face grim. "Damn it, this is worse than I thought. This isn't just a pack, this is a whole new ball game." The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with the weight of this horrifying revelation. We had thought their evolution was limited to speed, strength, cunning, but now, this, exploration, understanding. It meant they were not just a threat to our bodies, but to our very place at the top of the food chain. "We need to get closer," Silas said, his voice hard, breaking the silence. "We need to understand this before it's too late." Marcus looked at him, then at me. "It's too risky. This isn't just a scavenging run anymore. This is a scientific expedition into the heart of their evolution." "And if we don't, we're already dead," Silas countered, his eyes unwavering. "We need to know what they're becoming. We need to know what we're up against." He was right. We couldn't run from this. We had to face it, to understand it, even if it meant staring into the abyss of humanity's sealed fate. Marcus nodded slowly, a grim determination settling on his face. "All right, but we go slow. We stay hidden, and the moment it goes south, we pull out. No heroics. Understand?" I nodded, my stomach churning. I gripped the rusty revolver, its weight a cold comfort in my trembling hand. I was about to witness something truly terrifying, something that would forever alter my understanding of the apocalypse. I was about to watch the ultimate evolution, and I knew, with a terrible certainty, that humanity's fate was about to be redefined. The descent into the valley was slow, painstaking. Marcus led the way, his movements fluid and silent, a ghost among the trees. Silas followed, his rifle held ready, his eyes constantly sweeping the shadows. I, the novice, brought up the rear, my heart a frantic drumbeat in my chest, every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves sending jolts of fear through me. The air grew heavier with the metallic scent of old blood and a subtle, unsettling smell of decay, different from the usual zombie stench, cleaner somehow, more sterile. We crept through the dense undergrowth, carefully avoiding fallen branches and loose rocks. Marcus paused frequently, using his binoculars to observe the scene below. The large infected carrying the duffel bag was still interacting with objects, picking up a rusted wrench, dropping it, picking it up again, its ruined head tilted as if in deep concentration. It wasn't just a mindless act, it was a repeated, investigative motion. I watched zombies evolve into something that vaguely resembled early hominids exploring primitive tools. "It's learning cause and effect," Silas whispered, his voice barely audible. "Not just reacting to the object, but testing its properties. This is a new level." My blood ran cold. Cause and effect. That was a huge leap. It implied a capacity for abstract thought, for rudimentary problem solving. This wasn't just an animal. This was a nascent intelligence, warped and twisted by hunger,
but intelligence nonetheless. This was a direct threat to humanity's very existence, not just its survival. We got within 100 yards of the ranger station, hidden by a thick cluster of pine trees. From this vantage point, we could clearly see the horror unfolding. The smaller infected continued their aimless wandering, their movements still shambling and predictable. But the larger one, the leader or learner, as I now thought of it, was different. Its movements were more purposeful, its interactions with the environment more deliberate. It paused, its head tilting. Then it shambled towards a broken ladder lying near the station wall. It nudged it with its foot, then with surprising strength dragged it clumsily towards a window. It didn't try to climb. It just leaned the ladder against the wall, then stepped back, observing. It was trying to understand leverage, trying to understand how to bypass an obstacle. My breath hitched. This was beyond anything I had imagined. This was true, terrifying evolution. I watched zombies evolve from a biological threat to a strategic, problem-solving adversary. Humanity's fate wasn't just sealed by a virus. It was being erased by a new species. "It's planning," I whispered, the words thick with dread. "It's trying to figure out how to get inside." Marcus nodded, his face grim. "They're learning from our mistakes, from our structures. We built the world. Now they're learning to tear it down, piece by piece, using our own tools against us." Suddenly, the learner stopped. Its head snapped up, its dead eyes fixed on our position in the trees. It hadn't seen us, but it had sensed us, or heard us. Its senses were evolving too. "Damn it," Silas hissed, raising his rifle. "It knows we're here." The learner let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that was different from the usual zombie moan. It was a command, a warning. The smaller infected, who had been milling aimlessly, immediately paused, their heads snapping towards their leader, then towards our position. They were responding to a signal, a call, a horrifying, primitive language. "Run!" Marcus roared, shoving me. "Now!" But it was too late. The smaller infected, spurred by their leader's command, charged, not a clumsy stumble, but a coordinated, terrifying surge. They split, fanning out, trying to encircle us. They had learned tactical movement. Silas and Marcus opened fire, their weapons spitting fire and lead. The crack of the shotgun, the sharp report of the rifle, echoed through the valley. Infected dropped, their bodies twitching, then going still. But for every one that fell, two more seemed to rise. Their numbers were overwhelming. I fumbled with the revolver, my hands shaking so violently I could barely aim. I squeezed the trigger. The shot went wide, kicking up dust. Another zombie lunged at me, its putrid breath hot on my face. I screamed, pulling the trigger again. This time, the bullet connected, a sickening thud, and the zombie dropped. But more were coming. They were pouring out of the ranger station, out of the surrounding trees. The learner was among them, its pace faster now, its eyes fixed on us with a terrifying, purposeful hunger. It was leading the charge. "Back to the ridge," Marcus shouted, firing his shotgun, dropping two infected in quick succession. "Fall back, don't let them cut us off." We turned and ran, scrambling back up the rocky incline, our legs burning, our lungs screaming for air. The sound of the chase was deafening behind us, a cacophony of groans, snarls, and the thud of their relentless footsteps. As we reached the crest of the ridge, panting, exhausted, Marcus risked a glance back. His face, already grim, contorted in horror. "Mimics," he choked out, pointing with a trembling finger. "Oh God, the mimics are here." Below, among the charging horde, I saw them. Figures, moving slightly differently, with an eerie, unnatural grace. And then I heard it. A soft whimper. A child's sob. Then a woman's desperate plea.
Help me! Please help me!" My heart seized. It was so real, so human. My instinct screamed to run towards it, to help. But Marcus's words, Anya's warnings, echoed in my mind. It was a trick, a deception, a horrifying evolution of their hunting strategy. I watched zombies evolve into something that preyed on our compassion, our humanity. This wasn't just the sealing of humanity's fate. It was the twisting of its very soul. "Don't look, don't listen," Silas roared, grabbing my arm, his face a mask of furious determination. "It's a trap. Keep moving." He fired his rifle at one of the mimics, a figure that had been crying out, its voice heartbreakingly human. The bullet tore through its head, and the whimpering stopped abruptly, replaced by a gurgle. It dropped, its human facade dissolving, revealing the dead horror beneath. The psychological toll was immense. My mind reeled. How could we fight something that mimicked our suffering, that turned our empathy into a weapon against us? This wasn't just the sealing of humanity's fate. It was the twisting of its very soul. "Don't look, don't listen," Silas roared, grabbing my arm, his face a mask of furious determination. "It's a trap. Keep moving." He fired his rifle at one of the mimics, a figure that had been crying out, its voice heartbreakingly human. The bullet tore through its head, and the whimpering stopped abruptly, replaced by a gurgle. It dropped, its human facade dissolving, revealing the dead horror beneath. The psychological toll was immense. My mind reeled. How could we fight something that mimicked our suffering, that turned our empathy into a weapon against us? This wasn't just the sealing of humanity's fate. It was the twisting of its very soul. "Don't look, don't listen," Silas roared, grabbing my arm, his face a mask of furious determination. "It's a trap. Keep moving." He fired his rifle at one of the mimics, a figure that had been crying out, its voice heartbreakingly human. The bullet tore through its head, and the whimpering stopped abruptly, replaced by a gurgle. It dropped, its human facade dissolving, revealing the dead horror beneath. The psychological toll was immense. My mind reeled. How could we fight something that mimicked our suffering, that turned our empathy into a weapon against us?
Humanity's fate wasn't just sealed, it was being meticulously, deliberately dismantled, piece by piece. We continued to run, fueled by raw terror and the desperate need to escape. The sounds of the mimics, the pathetic pleas, the desperate sobs were a horrifying chorus that haunted my every step. I tried to block them out, but they burrowed deep into my mind, twisting my gut. We ran for what felt like miles, deeper into the forest, until the sounds of the chase finally faded. We collapsed in a small, hidden hollow, gasping for breath, our bodies trembling, our minds shattered. Marcus, his face pale and drawn, stared at the ground. "They're learning too fast," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The mimics, the intelligence, we can't keep up." Silas, ever the pragmatist, simply reloaded his rifle, his face set in a grim mask. But even in his hardened eyes, I saw a flicker of profound despair. I too reloaded my revolver, my hands still shaking. 6 rounds, 6 chances. It felt like nothing against the tide of evolving horror we had just witnessed. We had truly watched zombies evolve. From shambling corpses to strategic, problem-solving, deceptive hunters. And with every new adaptation, with every horrifying leap in their intelligence, humanity's fate was becoming more and more irrevocably sealed. We had seen the future, and it was a world where our very humanity was our greatest weakness, preyed upon by an enemy that learned to wear our faces, speak with our voices, and twist our compassion into a tool for our destruction. What do you do when your empathy becomes a weapon against you? What do you do when the enemy learns to wear your face? I didn't have an answer. And I knew with a terrifying certainty that it was a question humanity would be forced to answer again and again until there was no one left to ask it. The long walk back to River's Edge was a blur of exhausted silence, punctuated only by our ragged breaths and the rustle of leaves underfoot. The horrors of the ranger station, the terrifying intelligence of the learner, the insidious deception of the mimics, they had imprinted themselves on our minds, a chilling testament to the accelerated evolution we had witnessed. Humanity's fate, once a grim certainty, now felt like a foregone conclusion. When we finally stumbled back into the clearing, the sun was already dipping below the horizon. Kai and Anya immediately rushed to us, their faces etched with worry. Buster, the terrier, barked a hesitant welcome, sensing our grim mood. "What happened?" Anya asked, her eyes scanning our weary faces, taking in our torn clothes, our haunted expressions. Marcus sank onto a log by the fire pit, his shotgun resting across his knees. He didn't answer immediately, just stared into the flickering flames. Silas, meanwhile, moved to the water barrel, splashing water on his face, his movements stiff and weary. "They're not just getting faster," I said, my voice hoarse, finally finding the words. "They're getting smarter, and they're learning to deceive us, to trick us." I recounted what we had seen, the learner interacting with tools, trying to understand leverage, the coordinated assault, a terrifying display of tactical movement, and the mimics, their horrifyingly human cries twisting our compassion into a deadly weakness. Kai listened, his young face growing paler with every word. Anya gripped her axe tighter, her knuckles white. The comfortable silence of River's Edge was shattered, replaced by a profound, chilling dread. "Mimics," Anya whispered, the word a curse. I heard stories, didn't want to believe them. "Believe them," Silas grunted, wiping his face dry. "They're real, and they're not just mimicking cries anymore. They're learning. Give them time, they'll mimic whole conversations, whole families." The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The idea of hearing a loved one's voice, calling out for help, only to find a monster waiting, was a betrayal that went deeper than any bite. It was a perversion of love, of family, of everything that made us human. Humanity's fate was sealed by an enemy that targeted our very soul. "So, what do we do?" Kai asked, his voice trembling. "If they're that smart, that coordinated, that deceptive, how do we fight them?" Marcus finally looked up, his eyes burning with a desperate intensity. "We adapt, we learn. We stop being reactive and we start being proactive. We learn their patterns, we understand their evolution, we turn their strengths against them." His words were a rallying cry, a flicker of defiance in the face of overwhelming despair. But even as he spoke them, I saw the doubt in his eyes, the terrifying realization that this was a war we were already losing. "How do we do that?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Information," Silas interjected, stepping closer to the fire. "We need more information. How quickly are they changing? What are their new weaknesses? How do they communicate?" He looked at me, a rare spark of something other than cynicism in his eyes. You're good at watching. You watch, you learn, you tell us what you see. My role, to witness, to understand, to become the eyes of humanity in the face of its evolving doom. I watched zombies evolve, and now it was my burden, my terrible responsibility, to document their terrifying ascent. Over the next few days at River's Edge, our small group dedicated itself to this new, desperate mission. We set up perimeter traps, not just physical tripwires, but rudimentary noise traps designed to differentiate between animal movement and the deliberate steps of the infected. We posted constant watch, not just looking for shamblers, but for anything that moved differently, anything that seemed too still, too patient, too smart. Silas taught me how to clean and load the revolver, how to aim for the head, how to conserve ammunition. Marcus drilled us in silent movement, in tactical retreat, in how to identify different types of infected by their gait, their sounds, their subtle behaviors. Anya, surprisingly knowledgeable about the forest, taught us tracking, how to read animal signs, how to move without leaving a trace. Kai, with his youthful enthusiasm, became our scout, daringly venturing further from camp, always returning with new observations, new pieces of the horrifying puzzle. We discovered new things. The evolved ones, the seekers, seemed to leave subtle markings on trees, not intentional, but consistent. Scratches, a unique broken branch pattern. A crude, unwitting form of territorial marking, or perhaps a primitive trail. We discovered that the mimics, while terrifying, had a slightly off cadence to their human sounds, a subtle rasp that, once identified, could be recognized. It was a razor's edge difference, but it was a difference. And I watched. I spent hours in the makeshift watchtower, binoculars pressed to my eyes, observing the distant tree line, the river, the movements of the dead. I saw groups of them, not just randomly wandering, but moving with a collective purpose, almost like patrols. I saw individual infected exhibiting bizarre new behaviors, one trying to pick up a stick, another seemingly fascinated by its own reflection in a discarded shard of glass. It wasn't full intelligence, not yet, but it was a beginning, a horrifying, undeniable beginning. The most chilling observation came from Kai. He had ventured towards the old bridge, hoping to scavenge for supplies. He returned, pale and shaken, his eyes wide with terror. "They're building," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They're not just learning about objects, they're using them." He described a crude dam built across a narrow section of the river, upstream from river's edge. Not purposefully, not with foresight, but by the sheer, accidental, relentless accumulation of floating debris, logs, rusted car parts, even human remains, all pushed by the current and snagged by the banks. And the infected, the learners and seekers, were interacting with it, nudging logs into place, pushing loose debris further into the blockage. It wasn't engineered. It was a horrifying, accidental cooperation, a collective instinct to manipulate their environment. "They're trying to block the river," Kai choked out, pure terror in his eyes. "They're cutting us off." My heart pounded. This was it, the next major leap. Not just using tools, but modifying the environment. Not just individual adaptation, but collective environmental manipulation. I watched zombies evolve into engineers, however crude, however accidental. This wasn't just sealing humanity's fate, it was terraforming the world into a landscape of death, brick by brick, log by log. Marcus, Silas, and Anya exchanged grim glances. The implications were clear. If the river was blocked, our primary escape route, our source of relatively safe passage, would be gone. And if they could block the river, what else could they do? Barricade roads? Trap entire valleys? "We have to stop them," Marcus said, his voice hard. "We break that dam before it's too late." Silas nodded, his face grim. "Agreed, but this isn't going to be a simple mission. If they're actively working on it, they'll be guarding it. And if they're building, they'll have learned how to use the terrain to their advantage. It's an ambush waiting to happen." We prepared for the mission, a desperate gamble against an evolving enemy. Our small group, 5 survivors against a tide of adaptive horror. Our lives, and perhaps the very last flicker of human hope, rested on our ability to outthink, outfight, and outlast an enemy that was rapidly becoming the dominant species. As we packed our gear, the silence of River's Edge was heavy with the weight of our impending battle. I gripped my revolver, its cold metal a stark reminder of the brutal reality. I had watched zombies evolve to this point, to a level of cunning and environmental manipulation that transcended mere hunger. Humanity's fate was sealed by this relentless, terrifying adaptation. But as long as I breathed, as long as we fought, we would defy that fate, one dam, one battle, 1 minute at a time. This was not just about survival anymore. It was about defiance. It was about proving that even in the face of such overwhelming, evolving horror, humanity still had a fight left in it, and I was ready to lead the charge, or die trying. Our journey to the dam was a tense, silent crawl through the dense riverside vegetation. Marcus led, his eyes sharp, his movements cautious. Silas brought up the rear, a watchful shadow. Kai, Anya, and I moved in the middle, our senses on high alert, listening for any telltale rustle, any unnatural groan. The air grew heavier with the damp scent of river mud and the faint, unsettling smell of decay, a grim perfume for the evolving dead. As we neared the dam site, the sounds intensified.
Not just groans, but a rhythmic splosh thump, the unmistakable sound of heavy objects being moved through water. They were actively working. This wasn't just an accidental accumulation anymore. This was a collective, purposeful effort. Marcus held up a hand, signaling a halt. We dropped to our knees, peering through the thick undergrowth. The sight that greeted us was a nightmare made manifest. A narrow section of the river, perhaps 50 yards wide, was indeed choked with debris. A grotesque collection of logs, smashed car parts, tangled rebar, and human bones, all forming a crude but undeniably effective barrier. The water, once free-flowing, now pooled behind it, rising slowly, ominously. And on the dam itself and along the banks were dozens of infected. Not just shambling, they were moving with a chilling purpose. The learners and seekers were everywhere, pushing logs, nudging debris. Some stood in the shallower water, their bodies half submerged, their dead eyes fixed on the flow, seemingly understanding the dynamic. Others were scrambling on the dam itself, their movements still clumsy, but their intent clear. I watched zombies evolve from mindless hunger to rudimentary construction, a horrifying leap in their collective intelligence and environmental manipulation. This wasn't just sealing humanity's fate, it was actively reshaping the world into a monument to their terrifying ascent. But the most terrifying sight was yet to come. Among them, I saw figures that moved differently. Too still, too quiet. My blood ran cold. The mimics. One of them, a woman in a torn dress, stood by the river's edge, seemingly weeping, her body racked with silent sobs. Another, a gaunt man, sat hunched on a log, head in his hands, making faint, whimpering sounds. They were strategically placed, lures for any desperate, empathetic survivor. "Damn it," Anya whispered, her grip tightening on her axe. "They're using the mimics to guard it." "They've learned how to coordinate their defenses," Silas muttered, his face grim. "Using their deception as a perimeter. This is advanced tactics." My stomach clenched. This was beyond anything we had imagined. They weren't just evolving physically. Their strategic intelligence was accelerating at a horrifying pace. Humanity's fate wasn't just sealed. It was being hunted by an enemy that understood psychological warfare. "What's the plan, Marcus?" Kai whispered, his voice trembling. "There are too many of them, and the mimics." Marcus surveyed the scene, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to hit them fast, hard, and we need to take out those mimics first. They're a distraction, a lethal one." Silas nodded. "We focus on breaching the dam itself. If we can get a good section to give way, the current will do the rest. They won't understand how to rebuild it quickly." "Kai, Anya, with me," Marcus commanded. "We create a diversion on the right flank, draw their attention. Alex, Silas, you hit the dam directly from the left. Explosives?" Silas shook his head. "No, too risky, too much noise. But I've got a breaching charge, smaller, more controlled, and quieter." He pulled a small plastic-wrapped package from his backpack. "Enough to blast through a couple of key logs if we place it right." My eyes widened. Explosives? This was a whole new level of danger, but it was our only chance. "All right," Marcus said, his voice low, filled with grim resolve. "We move on my signal. Alex, remember your training. Aim for the head. Don't hesitate. And don't, for God's sake, fall for the mimics. They are not human."
I nodded, my heart pounding, my hands slick with sweat. I gripped the revolver, its weight a cold comfort. I had watched zombies evolve into engineers, strategists, and deceivers. Now, it was time to fight back against the terrifying culmination of their evolution. We split, Marcus, Kai, and Anya heading right, moving with practiced stealth through the dense undergrowth. Silas and I crept left, making our way towards a cluster of thick logs that seemed to be a critical point in the dam structure. Every step was agonizingly slow, every rustle of leaves a potential betrayal. The mimics were closer now. I could hear them, faint whimpers, desperate pleas. "Help me, I'm hurt." The sounds burrowed deep into my mind, twisting my gut, making my resolve waver. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, forcing myself to remember Marcus's words. They are not human. Silas, meanwhile, was a machine. He moved with a quiet, focused determination, his eyes fixed on the dam. He reached the cluster of logs, dropping to one knee, already fumbling with the breaching charge. Then, Marcus's signal, a sharp, piercing whistle, followed by a burst of shotgun fire. Chaos erupted. The diversion worked perfectly. The infected on the right flank immediately surged towards the noise, their groans transforming into a furious roar. The mimics, their human cries abruptly cut off, joined the charge, their true, dead faces revealed in the sudden rush. "Go! Go! Go!" Silas barked, pointing to a gap in the logs. "Cover me! Keep them off!" I lunged forward, scrambling onto the dam, my revolver held ready. Two infected, drawn by the new commotion, turned towards us. I fired. The first shot went high, but the second connected, taking one in the head. It dropped, convulsing. The other one stumbled, its dead eyes fixed on me. I fired again. It dropped. Silas, meanwhile, had finished placing the breaching charge.
He pulled a small detonator from his pocket. "Clear! Get back! Now!" I scrambled back from the dam, leaping onto the muddy bank, my heart pounding. Silas pushed a button. Kaboom! The explosion was deafening, a concussive blast that rocked the entire dam. Water, logs, and debris erupted into the air, raining down with a spectacular fury. The dam groaned, shuddered, and then, with a mighty roar, a large section of it gave way. Water, logs, and debris surged through the breach, a torrent of rushing river, tearing at the remaining logs, pulling them free. The infected on the dam, caught in the sudden current, shrieked, flailing, then were swept away, tumbling downstream, their bodies battered against the rocks. We had done it. We had breached the dam. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining infected, infuriated by the explosion, by the destruction of their crude construction, turned their attention to us. They were pouring towards us, a wave of furious, evolving dead. And among them, I saw the learner, its movements faster now, its eyes burning with a chilling, focused rage. It had learned from its defeat. It was adapting. "Fall back," Silas roared, firing his rifle, dropping two of the charging infected. "To the boat, now!" We turned and ran, Marcus, Kai, and Anya converging on our position, their weapons spitting fire. We were outnumbered, outgunned, but we had bought ourselves time. We had broken their dam. As we scrambled into the waiting skiff, pushing it into the rushing current, I risked a glance back. The dam was failing, logs and debris washing downstream, the river slowly returning to its natural flow. But on the banks, the remaining infected roared, their cries echoing through the valley. And among them, the learner stood, motionless, its dead eyes fixed on us. It wasn't charging. It was watching, learning, remembering. My blood ran cold. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I watched zombies evolve to a level of cunning and strategic adaptation that made our victory feel hollow, temporary. Humanity's fate was sealed by an enemy that learned from every failure, growing stronger, smarter, more terrifying with every passing moment. And as the current pulled us away,
I knew with a terrible certainty that this was just the beginning of the next horrifying stage of their evolution. What would they build next? What new tactic would they unleash? And could we ever truly win, or just delay the inevitable, until there was nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide, and no one left to fight? The future was a terrifying, unknown abyss, and I was just a witness, documenting the relentless march towards humanity's final sealed fate. The current carried us swiftly downstream, away from the shattered dam and the enraged screams of the infected. Our small skiff bounced over the choppy water, the roar of the river momentarily drowning out the horror we had left behind. We were battered, exhausted, and shaken, but we were alive, and for now, that was enough. Marcus, Silas, Kai, Anya, and I huddled in the boat, our weapons across our laps, our eyes scanning the banks. The victory at the dam felt hollow, transient. We had pushed back, yes, but the image of the learner watching us, its dead eyes calculating, was seared into my mind. It was learning. They were all learning. "They'll be back," Silas grunted, breaking the silence. "They'll rebuild it, or they'll find another way to block the river, or they'll adapt to crossing it." His words were a cold, sobering reminder. This wasn't a battle won. It was a skirmish delayed. Humanity's fate wasn't just sealed, it was being actively unraveled by an enemy that demonstrated relentless adaptability. We spent the rest of the day drifting, only stopping briefly to forage for wild berries and nuts and to refill our water bottles from a small, clear stream. The deeper we went, the more the landscape changed. The evidence of human civilization thinned, replaced by untouched wilderness. It was beautiful, serene, and utterly terrifying. Here, in the wild, the evolving dead had no human structures to contend with, only the raw, unforgiving land. And they were learning it. Kai, with his sharp, young eyes, was the first to notice the shift. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the riverbank. "Footprints, not human." We looked. Tracks in the soft mud, long, splayed prints. Not entirely distinct, but clearly not human. And they led into the dense forest, not following any discernible path. "They're not just sticking to our roads anymore," Anya murmured, her face grim. "They're moving through the wilderness, becoming part of it." My blood ran cold. This was yet another terrifying evolution, not just adapting to our world, but adapting to nature, becoming truly feral, masters of the untamed. I watched zombies evolve into a new, dominant species, unhindered by the limitations of their former human forms. We pulled the skiff ashore just before dusk, finding a small, hidden cove beneath an overhang of ancient trees. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and pine needles. As we set up a small, camouflaged camp, the silence of the wilderness pressed in on us, a heavy, watchful presence. That night, huddled around a tiny, smokeless fire, we talked. Not about strategies, not about defenses, but about the world before. Marcus spoke of his family, lost in the early days. Anya, a former botanist, recalled the intricate beauty of an ecosystem now being twisted into a new horrific balance. Kai remembered his school, his friends, the simple joy of playing video games. Silas, surprisingly, spoke of a small, forgotten cabin in the mountains, a place of peace before the world ended. And I spoke of the supermarket, of Mr. Henderson, of the woman I'd hit, of Officer Lou, of the crushing guilt and the dawning horror, of how I had watched zombies evolve from a news report to a personal nightmare, each stage more terrifying than the last. "Do you think there's an end to this?" Kai asked, his voice barely a whisper, staring into the embers. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. "Not an end," Silas finally grunted, his voice rough. "A new beginning. For them." His brutal honesty was like a punch to the gut. He was right. This wasn't just a temporary horror. This was the new reality. Humanity's fate was sealed. The old world was gone, replaced by a world where the evolving dead were the inheritors, the apex predators. "But we're still here," Anya said, her voice surprisingly strong. We're still fighting. That means something. It means we're stubborn, Marcus said, a grim smile touching his lips. It means we're not giving up, not yet. His words, simple and defiant, resonated. They were a flicker of hope, a fragile flame against the encroaching darkness. The next morning, we continued our journey downstream, the river our guide, our silent protector. But the wilderness was no longer a safe haven. It was another frontier for the evolving dead. We passed strange sights. A deer, impaled on a broken branch, clearly the victim of a coordinated hunt by the evolving infected. A small, crude nest of tangled branches and mud on a river island, something the infected had clearly built, though for what purpose, we couldn't fathom. Every new discovery was a chilling testament to their relentless adaptation, their slow, terrifying ascent towards a new, dominant form of life. Then, a few days later, we saw it. Not a dam, not a nest, something else. We were nearing the end of the navigable river, where it branched into a dozen smaller streams, snaking through a vast, overgrown marsh. The air here was thick with the smell of stagnant water and decaying vegetation. The trees were gnarled and ancient, their roots forming a tangled maze. It was a place where light barely penetrated, a world of shadows and whispers. And in the center of the marsh, rising from the murky water, was a structure. Crude, massive, and utterly terrifying. A towering mound of interwoven logs, mud, and what looked like scavenged metal and plastic, rising almost 20 feet high. It was a monstrous, organic fortress built by the evolving dead. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a dam. This was a settlement, a hive, a deliberate, constructed home for the evolving dead. I watched zombies evolve from mindless, wandering hordes to architects constructing their own fortifications, their own twisted cities of the damned. Humanity's fate was sealed by an enemy that had not only learned to adapt, but to build. Around the base of the structure, and even on its lower levels, moved hundreds of infected. Not just shambling, they were interacting with the structure, adding to it, reinforcing it. The learners were working alongside the seekers. The mimics were silent, their deceptive cries unnecessary here. They were a colony, a civilization, a horrifying, sentient, collective organism. Marcus gripped his shotgun, his face pale, his eyes wide with a profound, bone-deep terror. Silas, for the first time since I'd met him, seemed utterly speechless, his jaw hanging slack. Anya and Kai stared, their faces masks of horror. "This is it," Anya whispering, her voice trembling. "This is the end. They've won." I couldn't speak. My mind reeled, trying to comprehend the sheer scale of this evolution. From a single shambler in a supermarket to this monstrous living fortress, a monument to their terrifying ascent. Then, a movement from the very top of the structure. A figure, larger than the others, stood silhouetted against the pale sky. The learner. Its head turned slowly, its dead eyes fixed on our tiny skiff, drifting aimlessly in the murky water. It knew we were there. It had been watching us. And it had been building. It let out a low, guttural roar. Not a groan, a triumph. A declaration. The sound resonated through the marsh, a horrifying echo of their victory, of humanity's absolute and irreversible defeat. It was a sound that sealed our fate, not just as individuals, but as a species. "This is it," I whispered, the words raw, ripped from my gut. Humanity's fate was sealed. I watched them evolve, and this is what they became. Marcus, finding his voice, grabbed the oars, frantically paddling us away. "We need to go, now, before they send out a hunting party." But even as we turned, I couldn't tear my eyes away from the monstrous structure, from the figure standing at its apex, watching us with its dead, knowing eyes. It was a monument to our failure, a terrifying testament to their unstoppable evolution. We paddled frantically, fleeing through the murky waters, leaving behind the horrifying sight of their new world. The future was clear now. Not a fight for survival, but a desperate final retreat. As we disappeared into the tangled maze of the marsh, leaving their monstrous fortress behind, I knew that this was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new one, theirs. And as long as I was breathing, as long as I could bear witness, I would watch. I would learn. And I would tell the tale of how humanity's fate was sealed, one horrifying evolution at a time. The drone of their collective triumph echoed in my ears, a chilling reminder that the world we knew was gone, forever. And I, a lone survivor, had just witnessed the final, terrifying nail in humanity's coffin. What would you do if you watched humanity's fate being sealed before your very eyes? I still don't know what we'll do, but I know we have to keep fighting, even against a fate that seems so utterly, terrifyingly sealed.